Jack.
Levi.
The Book Club from Hell.
Hello everyone, this is Jack with the Book Club from Hell, an entity dreamed into existence by a child author in a higher realm, one who dreams of being eaten by a crocodile. Nobody spoke, and we listened. It's fiction time again, and what better place to go to for fiction than to F Gardner? He is, after all, the world's premier author, as judged by the perpetual meltdown that is the 4chan literature board. But he doesn't only have 4chan's approval, his YouTube handle is @famousauthor, and if that doesn't get your attention, self-endorsement or not, then I don't know what ever could. F. Gardner is responsible for the Call of Horror series of books, a constellation of 13 loosely linked horror novels, self-published on Amazon, the crown jewel of which is Call of the Crocodile, the subject of today's episode. Described by its blurb as a dark fantasy horror novel set during Halloween, after a boy is eaten alive by a crocodile, his family begins a descent into madness and terror in this odyssey of modern horror. Is F. Gardner serious? Is he a high-effort troll playing us all for fools? We got memed into reading this book, and we're no wiser for having finished it. F. Gardner was, and is, an enigma. So if you're ready to fall into a mirror house of oddly repeating sentences, wayward commas and metatextual masturbation, then enjoy. I don't want to be too mean to authors who are self-publishing. This guy obviously cares about what he's doing because he's written something like 13 novels and talks at length about his craft on his YouTube channel. I think his YouTube channel is Famous Author. The videos are really something special. I'll put the link to his channel in
I
the
didn't
show notes.
I didn't watch any of his videos.
It's him sitting in a bathrobe in a living room talking about how good he is, which is high quality content, and I've watched a lot of his videos. But despite the fact that I don't want to be too hard on people who are who are trying to make new things, this book was not good. Just lukewarm. It was a lukewarm book.
Yeah, I think he has committed the number one cardinal sin that will end you up, even in the bad books of Book Club from Hell, which is that he's boring.
Yeah, exactly.
But
it's just dull.
We will not be boring. I hope. In fact, I hope that you will, instead of reading the original Call of the Crocodile, you just listen to us instead. You'll have a lot more fun. And you'll
the
get
problem
the
is
high-level idea.
We've
of what
both proven ourselves to be really, really unreliable when it comes to things being true or not. So, yeah, people could listen to us recount the plot of Call of the Crocodile. They just have to bear in mind that we might make things up.
Yeah, well,
this will be an embellished recounting of the book.
It's called academic freedom, and we are the internet's foremost anthropologists on strange literature.
I have tenure. They can't get rid of me.
Yeah, we have tenure on our own podcast.
We both have tenure on Book Club from Hell.
This is our classroom. Yeah, so he's got a full series. So let me see. There's 13 books in the series, is it? Books in this series, 13. So. Call of the Crocodile,
Horror's
Call of the Arcade, Call of the Kappa, Call of the Cherokee, Call of the Cradle, Hunger of the Kangaroo, Reptilian Odyssey.
Wait. What's Hunger of the Kangaroo about?
Hold on, I'll get that in you. It's got a really funny... So... I do actually really like his covers. I'll give him that. I hope he's making them himself.
Drawing.
Yeah, the chalkboard. Then Jigoku Ouroboros. It's so funny, hey. He's got his little knife and fork. Oh no, it's a fork and a spoon. You call that a knife? That's a spoon. Ouroboros, Limbo's Rainbow. He's really obsessed with well, we'll get into that. He's referencing certain things quite a lot. Call of F Gardner. What? That's super meta. He's got a book called Call of F Gardner, and he's put himself on the cover. That's so funny. Oh, dude. Check out that one.
So Call of F Gardner, he proudly says, was written in 8 days.
Horror's Call and Call of the Machine Elves. Okay, if we're going to do another F Gardner at any point, I would
please not.
There's Call of the Machine Elves. I might do that. I might do Hunger of the Kangaroos, but I might also be open to doing Call of F Gardner, because I think something that meta would be really funny. See what it's actually like.
If this episode is popular enough, then maybe I would consider doing F Gardner again, but it would need to be really popular for me to read more F Gardner.
Yeah, so get on the Discord if you guys like this and tell us to do more F Gardner.
He has this very strange writing style where he seems to forget what he's already written. Not even within the same chapter or within the same paragraph, but sometimes within the same sentence, he'll just start repeating himself. And he'll say the same thing over and over again, not even in different ways, but sometimes in just the same way. I've got plenty of examples of this. We'll read through them as we recount the plot of the book. It's a very off-putting style.
Yeah. So how do you want to structure this? Should we just go chapter by chapter, or should we do a high-level narrative, roughly speaking? Don't bury the lead too much, unlike our SE5 episode where we fucking buried it like an hour deep.
Yeah, let's just go through the plot of the book. We'll give the Wikipedia plot summary, plus a running commentary.
So, Call of the Crocodile. The opening premise, and I'll highlight the opening. The opening
read
premise.
The blurb.
Do I even have the blurb?
I've got it here.
I don't have the blurb on
the blurb is a dark fantasy horror novel set during Halloween. After a boy is eaten alive by a crocodile, his family begins a descent into madness and terror in this odyssey of modern horror.
He's done a wonderful job of catfishing the shit out of his own book.
The crocodile actually isn't that important in the book. It doesn't really come up much.
Yeah, it's a red herring.
It's yeah. So my first note in the notes I took on this book, chapter 1, Child's Play, is he doesn't understand how to use apostrophes. And that was a consistent problem throughout this entire book. He just does not know how to use apostrophes. Which is like it's a petty thing to complain about, but after a while it just gets really irritating when someone consistently gets it wrong.
Yeah, he uses apostrophes on plurals, or just all over the place.
And I couldn't pick out a pattern with his strange apostrophes. It just seems like he uses them randomly. Sometimes it'll be correct.
It's pretty interesting to be a famous author with a massive YouTube channel and not know how to use apostrophes. And look, I love Ebonics, so I don't necessarily think that there is a correct way to communicate, but certainly if you're going to communicate in a way that it is not normal or not mainstream or whatever, at least do it consistently. Make the mistake consistently.
Just get it wrong consistently then.
Yeah, because at least then people be able to figure out what you're trying to do and adjust. But if it's just pure noise, your reader can't keep up. F Gardner. Yeah,
this first chapter, Child's Play, introduces some of the characters, and it takes place in this it's some theme park and resort inside a giant church, and one of the characters, Pete, who's a boy, is with his dad Joe, and his brothers Jimmy and Rafe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing Rafe's name
as
right.
In Raphael.
Raph and
He's
Raphael.
named after the famous author /
the Ninja
grandfather.
Turtle.
Yeah, the Ninja Turtle. Raph. I would name the kid Raphael. I think it's a sick name. Well, not now. Now F. Gardner's fucking ruined Raphael for my son. You will now be Donatello.
So what F. Gardner keeps doing is he keeps foreshadowing things and referencing things that will happen later in the book, but there's no underlying theme I can really get from it. They just seem like meaningless repeating images. So the book starts out with Pete playing some sort of VR game and shooting a crocodile monster with his riffle, RIFFLE, which I'm assuming is some sort of relative of the rifle. And then it stops. And later in the book...
It's one of those guns that just shoots confetti at the end.
Yeah, exactly. It's a Nerf gun. It's a Nerf rifle. Later in the book, someone fights a crocodile monster. I think it's Joe. And this scene is sort of foreshadowing that, but I'm not sure why. It seems like he's using all of these literary devices like illusion, foreshadowing, but I'm not actually sure what he's using them for. Just because there are literary tools available to you doesn't mean you should just use them unless there's a point. I mean, do I need to explain that, or?
Long-time listeners of this show, shout out KL, shout out Keon, shout out the rest of the Discord.
Trent Heilig, whose name's changed so often that
I love it. I love how much Heilig changed his name. It's so fucking good.
Spiritual fuckboy.
Spiritual fuckboy is a good one. The Preacher. He's had some bangers. I wish that he'd recorded like all of his name changes. He's got great ones.
I think the Preacher's Trent, or the user formerly known as Trent.
Thank you, faceless, pseudonymous internet friends, for keeping us entertained.
Cryo, who's a fellow disciple of the Bloat Lord.
Do you reckon Cryo's into powerlifting then? The Bloat Lord.
I mean, yeah, there's a significant crossover between people who are gym rats and people who know who Kyriakos Grizzly is. So, yeah, I'd say there's a strong probability that Cryo spends too much time in the gym.
That's so funny. Good on him. So anyways, what was I saying? So sometimes we make reference to our authors, being in like a math exam, and they've sort of like gotten the right answer in some capacity, but their working out is wrong. So they lose points on their working. Imagine, like, let's transpose that analogy to English literature. This is that kid in class who, on his high school certificate to go well in English literature, just memorized every single literary technique one can use and then just tried to smash it into their short story on the final exam. That's what F Gardner's done.
He's someone who's certainly very fond of a whole number of things. It's particularly illusion he likes. He'll just keep bringing up things like Dante's Inferno or other books that are prestigious to have pretended to have read. But those illusions don't add anything. It's just noise.
He does that a lot.
Or maybe the richness of his elusiveness to the Divine Comedy went straight over my head because I got halfway through it and realised that I just don't like poetry and couldn't keep going.
I will caveat this, but I don't want to spoil the twist. So we should also give people there's a big twist. There's a big M. Night Shyamalan level twist.
That was...
And I don't want to spoil it. And genuinely, when we get up to the point where it's spoiling, we should say, hey, like, plot twist spoiler, because people, hypothetically, there might be somebody out there who will actually go and read it and doesn't want it spoiled. It's fucking horrible, though, but there is a caveat to that, and we'll come back to that when we get up to chapter 15.
Shouldn't we just say that this entire podcast will be spoilers, though? We're going to be going through the plot of this book. If you truly are wanting to read
we'll give
Call
you
of the Crocodile by F. Gardner and want to go in blind, then stop listening, read it, come back and listen to this episode, and since you will know the text too, the richness of our textual understanding and our unpacking of the themes of this book will mean that much more to you.
Yeah. I listened to it. And I actually...
Is there an audiobook?
No, there's a dude on YouTube who recorded a full 5.5 hour reading of it, and he actually did a really good job. Yeah. He actually, listening to that guy read the book was more enjoyable than reading the book itself. For sure.
I can imagine you wouldn't see the strange formatting.
Yeah, I guess that's an issue.
Unless he read it in a way to convey the strange formatting.
No, and he actually like changed his voice and stuff. So it was actually fairly engaging. The guy's really quite a good reader. He should not read F Gardner stuff. Yeah.
That's where the views are.
Yeah, that's where the views are. And one of the other things that F. Gardner does is, of all the literary techniques, is he'll just keep on hammering on the symbolism.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, this thing looks, there's like this snake in this painting. A snake is like a crocodile. It's a reptile. And then, that reminds me of like this turtle that we used to own. Turtle reminds me of reptiles, and reptiles remind me of crocodiles. It's like, did it so many fucking times. It was ridiculous.
He doesn't really trust the reader to draw any of their own inferences from even the most heavy-handed symbolism. He assumes that everyone reading is a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
And just won't understand the significance of... It's even something like, there'll be a clock in the shape of a crocodile, and he'll feel the need to explain to the reader why some character who knows someone who got eaten by a crocodile would be unsettled by that.
Yeah.
Or how he'll bring up something and then go off on a page-long discursion telling you about what that thing is and why it's significant.
He is the definition of show don't tell, as in he needs to do show don't tell. There's this one basic tip about like not beating if you're writing fiction. And look, I'm not a fiction writer, obviously, but in my small amount of like short stories and stuff that I wrote when I was younger, trying not to browbeat the reader with here's exactly what I mean. You need to be a bit more subtle than that. Like the guy literally explains like every reference he makes. In fact, there's an early one. I'll see if I can find it.
How about I open up with a quote from Chapter 2, Dawn. The first chapter set at that Halloween theme park in a church ends with Pete, one of the children, walking off, and plot twist, he gets eaten by a crocodile. Just the conceit of this story. Some little kid gets eaten by a crocodile.
And that does happen in Florida.
When I first read that, I thought that this book was going to be funny because I find that it's such an absurd premise that I thought it was going to be a comedy book, but no, he plays the child getting eaten by a crocodile at a theme park really straight.
15th of June 2016. A 2-year-old boy pulled by an alligator into a lagoon near a Walt Disney World hotel has been found dead, authorities said. So, it's very conceivable.
It can happen.
It does happen. It happened, and it inspired this book.
There we go. Well, this book tackles several weighty societal themes. Obviously, one of those themes are not just crocodile attacks, because alligators can do it too, but maybe crocodilian attacks on children. One of the most pressing issues of our time. So I'll
the scourge of crocodiles eating children all across the Northern Territory.
I'll open with a quote from the beginning of Chapter 2, Dawn, which is describing Joe's strange dream. So Joe is the father of Pete, the boy who was eaten by a crocodile. And this chapter takes place a year after Pete was eaten by a crocodile. Dreams are nothing more than a series of images projected by the subconscious. Joe had known that. The human mind strings the dreamt visions together in a narrative, even if the images don't necessarily go together. That's simply how our minds operate. Like a child playing a game of ad-libs, trying his or her best to make sense out of the hand they've been dealt. Figments, which seem like phantoms in the night, but they're merely phantasms. Figments, with an apostrophe. Maybe when there's an apostrophe that's not meant to be there, I'll just read it as, instead of figments, as figment is of one's imagination, like an hallucination brought on as a result of inebriation, like the child's play of some kid's fabrication. Joe had understood that, as he was not a superstitious man, but why did this feel like more than a mere dream? Almost more real than his waking moments. Do animals dream the same, sequentially? Joe did not know. However, he felt as if he were now fated to find out, whether he wanted to or not. More than that, Joe was beginning to feel like Sisyphus, the character found in Greek mythology, the one who had been condemned to eternally push a boulder up a hill, only to have it roll back down repeatedly, as if he were in Tartarus, the Greek term for the abyss.
Yeah.
It had begun to feel all too familiar, too real for a dream. This quote's good because
It's actually the quote that I wanted to read.
Oh, really? It's
Yeah.
the perfect quote for just summing up F. Gardner. It starts out with some discussion of what are dreams. I'll say some sort of conceptual discussion which doesn't really go anywhere and just repeats itself. And then he'll start referencing Greek mythology or something like that and over-explain everything. So say you invoke Sisyphus, you can just say that something is Sisyphean and leave it at that. Many readers will know the story of Sisyphus, and if they don't, they're perfectly capable of just looking it up on Google.
Yeah, it's weird because he makes these references, say, to Greek. Well, in this case, Greek, and it's Dante's was written in Latin, but right? I don't know.
It was Dante's Inferno was written in Italian. It's
In Italian, right?
important because it's one of the first big works like that was not written in Latin.
Okay. So, like, long story short, he makes a lot of references, but he explains his references, and that's the weird part. Is like
It's even better than referencing.
it's make the reference. Make the reference. That's it. Leave it at that.
No, this is citation 2.0. This is F. Gardner citation.
So do you think... I didn't watch any of his videos. Did you watch his videos?
Yeah, I've watched a bunch of them. They're really good.
What's he like as a person? Does he seem... Well, on camera, obviously, but like, what does he seem like? I'm going to guess that he
like
seems
the
like...
sort of person who'd write Call of the Crocodile.
Okay.
I recommend his YouTube channel. I'll put it in the show notes for this episode so that people can have easy access to it.
Okay, I'm gonna listen to his channel. Anyways, yeah, he explains everything.
Yeah, so the quote I read out earlier was referencing a dream that Joe had where Joe is some sort of crocodile monster and goes into a courtyard full of children and eats a child. And then Joe wakes up, and because his son a year ago had been eaten by a crocodile, he's very upset by this. And F. Gardner makes sure to tell you that Joe is upset by it and why Joe is upset by it. Even though, again, it's like most readers would probably be able to put two and two together, that if a father had his son eaten by a crocodile, then he's going to be disturbed by a dream where he's a crocodile monster and starts eating children. But yeah, that's the way things go with this guy. There are some other good quotes from this chapter. He starts talking about Dante's Inferno here as well. The Dante's Inferno references start early and never really let up. So, I quote, "At last, Joe's eyes open as the man awakens in his bed. The first thing he hears upon waking was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the room. Relieved the nightmare was over, Joe attempts to calm his heart rate by breathing slowly. The sweat drips down his forehead in unison with the infernal ticking. The word resonates within the man as Joe reflects on the matter, about how it aptly describes his feelings, infernal, as in the word inferno, the chapter from Dante's Divine Comedy. If the rest of his life is anything like that story, he can only hope that the subsequent chapters sync up as well, Purgatorio, and then finally Paradiso. Purgatory and Paradise. Joe and his family, whole once more, together in Elysian peace."
Ugh. Yeah.
Okay, I don't want this to turn this into one of those episodes where we just shit on something and don't try to be generous. It's just the author makes it really hard.
Yeah. He hits you over the head unnecessarily.
Then I've got one final quote from here that I think sums up his strange habit in prose of repeating himself. It's almost as if he's just forgotten what he's written. I'm almost certain this just wasn't edited, even by him. He didn't read through it after he'd finished his very first draft.
Yeah, you will.
So here's a quote.
You've written a book now, and you can see the difference between iterations, right? And you don't think there's been any
like
iteration
80% of the work comes after writing your first draft.
There you go. And you don't reckon he did any iterations?
I mean, I kind of hope he didn't, because if he did iterations, it means he looked at this stuff and went, "Yeah, that's what I want to say."
That's better than the previous one.
Well, for example, so his repeating of things that that are just obvious. Here's a quote. "This has gone on long enough," thought Joe. "I have to get ready to start my day." The man looks out of his window and glances at the morning sun. The sun was in the midst of rising. Joe can take solace, knowing that nightmares will haunt him no more, at least not till the next night, for the day had officially begun. He tells you 3 times that it's morning and the sun's rising. It's like, yeah, dude, I know, you told me.
It's so funny. I didn't like it when I was reading it, but hearing you talk about it is really funny. I don't know, man.
That's the way with most of our episodes, though, is that I don't like reading it, but it's funny to talk about.
It's funny to talk about. And you guys are getting snippets, like the isolated chunks of the highlight reel of the horror of this book, but it's truly an incredibly boring read. Like, to get to those little weird bits is just such a trek.
Well, the thing is, it's like actually in many of the episodes we've noted this, it's funny when you hear little snippets of it in isolation. But the thing is, when you're immersed in something this strange for 200 pages, it very quickly just becomes normal. You acclimatize to it. And in becoming normal, it becomes boring.
Yeah. Well, I found it boring from the very beginning. His characters, like, the dialogue is fucking ridiculous. It's so bad.
It is. It's incredible.
But especially the early dialogue. It's towards the end it gets a bit better, but like early on, he doesn't like the dialogue of different people, different characters. In principle, should say the way they speak should be part of their character. Early on, each character just talks the same, essentially.
They're all F Gardner.
Yeah, they're all F Gardner.
I especially like the children talking to each other over lunch about quantum field theory, and I feel like we need a game of Book Club from Hell Bingo, the things that just keep coming up in books that we read. Quantum field theory comes up all the time. Race mixing comes up all the time. That's actually a compliment I will pay F. Gardner in the context of this podcast, is he didn't talk about race mixing. And I'm really...
Misogynation, yeah.
I'm so fucking sick of opening up one of the books that we're meant to read and they'll start talking about race mixing, even in places where you don't expect it, like the beginning was the end. I didn't expect a discussion on race mixing, but he sucker punched me with that.
I was totally expecting it. I was like, a book about evolution, nah, it'll be really racist.
No, I expected it to be racist. I just didn't expect the monkey with the superpower of being able to race mix to go around raping monkeys of different races to make human offspring. Anyway, if people want to hear more about this, listen to
That's a banger. I thought that episode was really funny. Yeah, go listen to that one. But also listen to this one.
Yeah. Listen to it after you've listened to this one.
Yeah.
Or listen to both in parallel.
Yeah, listen to all our episodes in parallel. and take acid,
repeatedly.
and then don't tell the police it was our idea when you did it. Is what I would say if I were an irresponsible person. But I'm not. So
No,
I didn't say that.
Given that we're hosting a podcast where we seek out these sorts of books, we can be nothing but responsible.
Yes. Well, we're doing a public service. We're protecting people from these books.
Yeah, we read Varg Smile, so you don't have to.
Shall we move on? What are we up to? 3 or 4?
Chapter 3, Trepidation. And, oh man, and this is with his psychiatrist, and now that I know where the psychiatrist's name comes from, I hate this scene even more.
Yeah. His psychiatrist, Dr. Boltzmann, for any of you physics nerds out there, you might pick up on that one. He's foreshadowing what happens later in the book.
This is a literary device. The thing is, though, he's foreshadowing, but it's not for anything because the reader just doesn't know what. The reader has no context. This won't mean anything to the reader until later. And then even
Unless
later
they
when you
happen
know
to
the
be
connection,
reading
it
it
doesn't
multiple
mean
times.
anything.
For some reason. Maybe there's some huge F Gardner fan out there who's read this like 3 times.
It's a book that rewards rereading. Anyway, this chapter, Joe's seeing his psychiatrist that he's seeing because his child got eaten by a crocodile, which, yeah, that's going to traumatize you. So at least that aspect of this is believable. But the dialogue between these two is really something else.
Should we do some role play, Jack?
Oh yeah, who do you want to be?
Right.
And
I reckon you've got a good psychiatrist voice. Hey.
Okay, I did a psych rotation. So
yeah, you did. I'll be Joe. Should we?
Who's the narrator?
Who's the narrator? We need Edward. Edward could be the narrator. Actually, that's an interesting. That's a good point. Maybe if we do a live reading sometime with Ed, he can we'll have 3 different voices for the staging. I don't know. Fucking who cares?
Okay, I'll narrate.
Do you want to go from a particular
Dr.
point?
Boltzmann.
Yeah, you narrate.
I've got
Dr. Boltzmann.
So my quote begins
from?
sitting in an office of modest size.
Okay. Oh, so the beginning of the chapter.
Yeah. Sitting in an office room of modest size, Joe finds himself with an appointment with his doctor. His psychiatrist, Dr. Boltzmann, remains composed with a notepad while Joe rests on a couch. In a state of unease, the dishevelled-looking man clears his throat and begins to discuss his plight.
Feels like I'm in hell,
Joe says. What was that? His doctor asks.
I said it feels like I'm in hell.
Joe repeated blankly.
Or, at least, purgatory.
He continued.
Do you believe in hell?
Joe asks of his physician. I'm not sure if I do, Joe.
I'm not sure if I do. Sorry.
You Dr. Boltzmann as well.
I'm going like full Keanu Reeves in that movie where he shoots everyone, John Wick. That's what I'm channeling right now as John Wick.
I'm not sure if I do, Joe. I try not to dwell too much, worrying about the conditions of the hereafter. The reputable hereafter, that is, the doctor answers, scribbling away in his notepad.
I see. I guess it seems you're at the very least a skeptic.
Joe inquires. How can I not be? I specialise in the field of medicine and the study of the mind. My chosen career naturally makes me question things. It tends to be invariable in my profession, or at least to an extent, Dr. Boltzmann says.
Chosen? So you don't believe in fate at all? You mean like what men of the cloth refer to as a calling?
Joe asks. I wouldn't necessarily say I wouldn't say I necessarily do. But if I did, though, I'm not certain it's relevant. if I'm to be entirely honest with you. that's the end of what I've written down as a quote.
I think we did a much better job than F Gardner. It sounds better when we do it than it reads.
You also don't see the weird punctuation. He uses commas really strangely. Most of the time when he says someone's name, he'll just put a comma after it, and it makes it feel really weird to read. The rhythm of the prose is all
like
off.
Joe inquires is like Joe, comma, inquires.
Inquires.
It's like, one of the rules for using commas is like breaking up subclauses. It's like, that is not... Joe inquires, there are no subclauses. That's a unit of that's like a linguistic unit that doesn't need to be broken up. Why is he broken it up? Like, neither of those two words by themselves in that context would make any sense.
Well, he's an advanced comma user.
Maybe I just suck at English.
He's a power user of commas.
Anyway, so he basically... I'm not entirely sure what the point of this goddamn chapter is, but he's basically having a conversation about his troubles with his psychiatrist, and talking about his dreams
and his
having
dreams
nightmares.
of being a crocodile monster.
A crocodile monster that eats his own... He has nightmares about eating his own sons.
Yeah. And he talks about how he's not taking his SSRIs regularly and is just drinking a ton instead. And it's Joe drinking tons to deal with the trauma of his son's devourment by a crocodile is a really heavy-handed plot point for about a chapter or two. As in, F. Gardner will just bring up that Joe's getting on the sauce all the time because of Pete's death. But then he just seems to forget about it and it just disappears that Joe's a relentless day drunk. I also like to say he keeps switching between the present and past tense and it doesn't make sense.
Oh yeah, I noticed that as well. It's really annoying.
Yeah.
Was there anything other? Oh, he makes a bunch of really dumb references to Captain Hook and Peter Pan and stuff.
Oh, there are some... Oh, yeah, fuck. So throughout the book, he just keeps referencing Peter Pan, the Phantom of the Opera, and
I'll read a quote. It's pretty good. He knew that drinking wasn't the answer, but at least it seemed to dull his torment. I can still picture it, like it's burned into the back of my eyelids, Joe thinks. The man remembered back when he found what little remains of his son. So it's funny. I found this part really funny. The eyeless skull, eyes plucked right out. He turns his attention once more to the bottle and takes a large gulp. Joe closes his eyes and rests his head back down on his pillow. Seemingly mocking him, the grandfather clock in his room strikes midnight. It was officially now October 31st, the day he dreaded most. Joe used to love Halloween as a kid growing up. It always seemed harmless, a carefree day children spent having fun. Now, as a grown man, he'll forevermore associate it with tragedy. With the day, his youngest son was viciously taken from him. The hand of the grandfather clock continued to tick away. Even the incessant ticking of the clock reminded him of his son's death, like that story in Peter Pan, how the villain in the story, Captain Hook, would panic and freak out every time he heard the ticking of a clock, since a crocodile had eaten his hand with his watch on it. So Joe, why does he put a comma there? Joe,
comma.
so Joe, comma, had also realized the cruel irony that his dead son's name was Pete. Furthermore, the name of one of his two surviving sons was Jimmy. A coincidence? Honestly, it didn't occur to him till after the incident. Jimmy, which his son went by, was short for James. Captain Hook's name was James Hook. He and his late wife had known of the vague connection, but now the matter just felt so strange. It's just like he had to ham it in there. Jimmy, James Hook. That's also Peter Pan. Peter Pan has a crocodile.
I've got this exact quote written down.
I was just like, is this going to stop? Is he going to do this for the entire fucking book?
And yeah, he does. The whole book is like this. In terms of his weird formatting, and why I don't think this even had one edit done, there's a quote here where he spells roller coaster in 3 different ways in one paragraph. He's talking about Joe's emotional turmoil. He had heard of people describing the loss of a loved one as feeling like being on a roller coaster. It's not, though. A lot of people can't comprehend what it's actually like. It's not like being on a roller coaster, watching life unfold. It's like being the roller coaster and not knowing what a roller coaster even is or what on earth is going on. And just spell roller coaster in one way. In this, it's spelt as 2 words, 1 word, or 2 words hyphenated. One after the other. I'm fairly tolerant when people will make spelling mistakes or grammatical errors or might mispunctuate if it's a one-off. But with this guy, it's just he can't make his mind up about how he's going to write anything. So he just does everything at once, and it's really, really confusing.
I would say that what's the word for it? Like finesse. He lacks finesse, you know?
Yes, he does.
Because there's a reason why these literary techniques are a part of the way people write, because they work under certain circumstances and when executed with finesse and taste, neither of which F. Gardner has.
Well, they're tools, and you use tools to solve certain problems. But
so what problem?
They're just
so what
not
problem?
needed.
So what problem do you think F. Gardner is trying to solve? Say with the one that you just read, the roller coaster one. What was he trying to
He's
convey
not
there?
using. Well, it's a metaphor of being on a roller coaster. I think if he just said something to the effect of Joe felt like he was on an emotional roller coaster, then in that case, the literary technique of a metaphor would work fine. The issue is he'll say it and then explain it. Everything will be over-explained because he doesn't trust his readers to pick up on his advanced level literary skills without him explicitly saying that he's doing something very clever.
I really want to read his other books. I want to read at least one of his other books to see if he improves over time. Like maybe if one of his books is like much more recent, that would.
How about we read Call of F Gardner, which was written in 8 days?
Yeah, it might have been like that. What was that book that was written by? Was it Mark Twain or somebody punched it out in like a week and it became a classic? It was one of the American authors that you like. Hemingway.
Oh, there are
Hemingway,
a bunch of people like that. I think
this.
Faulkner wrote As I Lay Dying
Yes,
in 2 weeks while he was working as a coal miner or something.
That's the one. It was that one you were talking about. Yeah, he might be like Faulkner.
I think he's exactly like Faulkner. He's exactly like one of my favourite authors. His prose style.
Now, Call of the Machine Elves was released on the 9th of November, 2022. So maybe we should read Call of the Machine Elves because that's the most recent, and there might be
that's going to be about DMT.
Improvement. It's after a day of senseless bloodshed and madness, a kindergartner is concerned that his reality is becoming a living nightmare.
Because he's been just
he's been huffing DMT. It turned out it was actually that other version of it. Was it 5-MeO? 5-MeO.
5-MeO.
One that's like breathing nightmare, pure nightmare.
Yeah, it sounds really bad. But still, if someone offered it to me,
well, you never
I'd
say
probably
no to
try
DMT. It doesn't matter what sort of analogs it has on it.
This is the DMT where you don't see anything and just fall into a nightmare hell dimension for 10 minutes. Give it to me.
Salvia? Would you do salvia?
Yeah.
That looks genuinely horrible. I don't know.
I've never heard anything good said about salvia, but I'd still
maybe with
Aristotle said all things in moderation. And you can take all things in moderation to mean that you should moderate your appetites, or you could take it to mean all things in moderation. You should try everything,
all things,
but moderately. And that's how I prefer
including DMT,
to interpret Aristotle's words. In which case, I would have to take a moderate dose of salvia.
Airtight argument.
It's the Aristotelian approach to intoxication. Anyway, chapter 4, premonition. So Raph and Jimmy, who are the two sons of Joe and the two brothers of the now eaten Pete, are at school, and it's Halloween, and because it's the anniversary of Pete's death, they're both feeling sad. And they meet with Father O'Reilly, a priest, because they go to a Catholic school. This book deals with Christianity as well. It deals with a number of weighty topics. And Father O'Reilly basically tries to comfort the kids, but does it clumsily. And Jimmy cries. Raph is really angry. And then Father O'Reilly starts talking about the second coming of Jesus Christ. Raph goes full Reddit and starts asking about inconsistencies in the Bible in a really, really obnoxious way. He just goes full r/atheism.
Yeah, he pretty much sounds like fucking Sam Harris.
At this point, I started really wondering whether Raph has a katana in his bedroom.
Yeah.
And oh fuck, I've got a good quote here where he brings up Occam's razor and then decides to explain it to the reader. So Father O'Reilly is talking to the boys. I know it can be difficult to keep your faith, especially in situations such as yours, but you must try. Praying alone can work miracles. You boys need to keep that in mind. I'm not going to lie to you boys and say I have all of life's answers figured out. I don't. I may be a priest, but I'm still just a man. It may sound too simple to be true, but prayer really is the best thing to participate in right now. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. You mean like Occam's razor? Was what Raph wanted to say to him. The philosophical principle which is used by many. The idea that the belief in some kind of a supernatural power took so many jumps in logic and was therefore an exceedingly irrational conclusion to reach.
Thank you, F. Gardner. This book truly is a whirlwind tour.
It's educational.
Philosophy. It is an educational book, in fact. He lured you in with the promise of an engaging horror story, and then he fucking educated you without
you're
you
gonna
even
learn.
knowing. All of a sudden, you're like, fucking epistemology, mate. Occam's razor. Yeah, I know that shit. As Father
what the best
O'Reilly
fiction
said.
does.
Yeah, exactly. Expands one's mind. Fantastic. Yeah, it's really weird because is it because he thinks his audience are idiots, or he's trying to just like look smart or something, or he's just a bad writer, or like he doesn't know how much he can assume of his audience? I guess being generous. I'll try to be generous. How can I be generous? I'm not sure that I can be generous. He's still learning the craft, maybe. There, that's my generous interpretation.
Yeah. It's very difficult. But I do get the impression that he's trying to show us how smart he is, and it's just obnoxious. It's just really irritating.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and then Father O'Reilly starts talking about Satan and says that Satan could take a reptilian form, like a crocodile, and so the boys go home and see their dad out the front gardening, and this is still in the period or the part of the book where Joe's drinking is a theme that's brought up every other paragraph. And I've got a quote here. Again, he's just repeating himself. Their father, was tending to his garden at the front of the house, watering the plants. The man appeared to be fairly calm as he leisurely whistled a tune. That's good to see him doing something other than drinking for a change, Raph thought to himself. Joe, his father, had been hitting the liquor pretty hard ever since Peter died. Dad had taken up gardening in the past year, and it comforted Raph to see that he was doing that upon returning home, as opposed to drinking away his sorrows. I guess everyone needs a hobby, and doing so must have helped take his mind off of Pete's death, he thought.
One of the other things that I wrote down in my notes was the overbearing inner monologues that this guy inserts
yeah, they're just
into
continuous.
the story. He inserts
They're relentless.
So many inner monologues, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I guess it depends on the story. So, especially if it's a story where it focuses primarily on a single character with the occasional like, what was he thinking or she thinking, But this is just like every character gets an inner monologue. We get to see the inside of what everybody's thinking all the time. And it's always in a very, like, hit you over the head. This is how we're driving the narrative forward. There's literally even a part where some ghouls read one of the characters' minds and the ghoul responds to it. And then the guy says, they must be reading my mind. It's like, fucking dude.
Yeah, the characters will just make some logical leap sometimes that I just don't understand how they did it. I mean, of course, I'm not able to suspend disbelief when I read this anyway, so I guess it doesn't make much of a difference, but it just makes it even harder to suspend disbelief.
Do you think that's part of the misuse of literary techniques, is if they essentially break the fourth wall and break you out of, because good fiction, you can imagine what's happening and you're able to emotionally suspend disbelief. But a ham job of the writing and use of literary techniques will snap you out of it, right? So at no point can you ever actually like get into what's happening in the story, because he's just like fumbling it so often.
Yeah. Well, you're not really in the story. You're constantly reading F. Gardner telling you what's happening in the story, and you can never get past that point, or at least I couldn't.
Yeah, it's extremely meta.
Yeah, fuck, it gets so much more meta later on, and it was in this chapter 4, where I thought, oh fuck, he's gonna do something really meta, isn't he? Well, I'll look for the quote where I got that sinking feeling and realized, no, he's gonna try to break the fourth wall, and I'm gonna hate it.
Your heart just drops out. You're reading like, no, don't do it. I saw this.
Yeah, here we go.
I didn't see exactly what happened coming, but I had a bad feeling.
Yeah, they're driving to their grandmother's place, Joe's mother's house, and they're going to spend Halloween there. While they're driving, it's the fucking foreshadowing. So they almost run over an old woman wearing a dark cloak, and that's going to come up later. And they're listening to a radio drama called The Phantom of Halloween. And it ends with this plot twist of a woman reading The Phantom of Halloween to her children. And so everything before that point was a story within the story of this radio drama. When I heard that, I had a bad feeling that he was going to try to do something like this. And then this quote following that made me sure that I was in for some bullshit meta plot twist. So, what a strange Deus Ex Machina ending, their father stated. It's true, they didn't know the context of the story, since they had just caught it at the end. However, the boys were familiar enough with the characters to know what they were supposed to be based off of. They were the Phantom of the Opera and Sherlock Holmes, both classic literary characters. They supposed it made sense for that sort of program to be on during All Hallows Eve. The bizarre plot twist reminded Joe of the trick of theatre he saw earlier in the Crocodile... Joe of the trick-or-treater he saw earlier in the crocodile costume. Must have just been a coincidence, he thought to himself. There's no way someone would do that to me on purpose. Deus Ex Machina, Jimmy inquires, inquires, with a bewildered expression on his face. Momentarily taking his attention off the car's wheel, Joe glances at his son and realizes Jimmy's unfamiliar with the word. Oh, it's a Latin term. It means God from the machine, like when a story has an unsolvable problem and something unexpected, like as if God himself steps in for its resolution to fix things. Like when you pray to him, the boy asks. Yes, Jimmy, Joe tells his son. It was a plot device used a lot in old plays, from my understanding. An unexpected ending to surprise the audience. Joe continued. Oh, I see, responded Jimmy. Stories use the plot device. No, that's not a typo. That's actually what he wrote. Stories use the plot device, usually do so to pull off a resolution to a mystery. Sometimes it's obvious or out of left field, unexpected, but other times they hinted at early on, and when he said this, I thought, fuck. Sometimes the best plot mysteries are ones that the reader didn't even realise were part of the plot. As if there were no real mystery to the story they had heard all along, and it was all part of a greater one they didn't even consider, but one that's hinted at. Jimmy turns to his father and opens his mouth as an epiphany hits him. You mean like with foreshadowing, Dad? I had such a bad feeling after reading this section. I knew he was going to try to do something metatextual and it would be awful.
Rick and Morty literally just released an episode like a week ago about meta-narratives and just ripping on them. It was really funny, but it was also really meta. And yeah, meta-narratives and shit can be fucked up really bad.
Meta-narratives can be interesting. They're just really hard to do. And if you fuck them up, it's obnoxious.
It's extremely obnoxious. Yeah. Moving on.
And then he has this whole thing where he's talking about one of the characters mentions the word behemoth. So of course, F Gardner needs to spend a lot of time explaining to you what that word means. Anyway, they get to their grandmother's house and the chapter ends. We're up to chapter 5, Arrival. And, okay, so the start of this chapter I thought was actually all right. There's a scene in this, I think it's in this chapter, where Raph finds his grandmother that was good. I liked it.
Yeah, it actually starts getting like Exorcist sort of vibes. This is actually where it starts getting scary. Well, not scary, but the horror themes start coming in.
He never settles down on one theme or one thing that's going to carry the rest of the story. Yeah. He just keeps changing it up. This bit gets kind of Exorcist, and then it changes almost into Nightmare on Elm Street with some spirit invading their dreams, and then we'll get to it when we get to it. He keeps changing, and he won't settle down on one thing.
Yeah, that is a good point, actually. He's also stealing stuff from other. It's not original. But then again, I've got a caveat coming up later when we get to the twist, so I won't criticize him too harshly for that.
So they find the door of their grandmother's house unlocked, and they walk in, and it's strangely humid inside. But this humidity and the strange warmth inside recedes quickly, and so they start looking around their grandmother's house or Joe's mum's house to try to find her, and they're calling out her name and she's not answering. For some reason, because of this, Raph and Jimmy decide to play hide and seek, which is another recurring theme, I guess you'd call it a theme, in that he just keeps talking about or comparing things in the book to hide and seek, but I'm not sure what point he's trying to make by comparing everything to hide and seek. We're also introduced to
it comes
Raph's
later.
Yeah, to Raph and Jimmy's grandfather. So
Raoul.
Raph his full name's Raphael, and his grandfather's name is Raoul.
It's the Spanish equivalent, I suppose.
So Raph's kind of named after him.
But then he gets teased.
And of course, again, F. Gardner needs to explain to you the biblical origin of the name Raphael, and it's just,
and the fact that
obnoxious.
it's also a reference to the artist. I think he explains every single part of it. The artist,
and then he explains to you that it has nothing to do with the
Turtles.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, and the Bible. It's like, thanks, mate.
Anyway, yeah, so they're playing hide and seek. Raph can't find Jimmy, but he goes into his grandma's room, and I'll read a quote. This part was good. I liked it. This was maybe 2 paragraphs of the book that I liked.
Big call.
So, once Raph turned on the lights, the boy's eyes quickly darted over to the corner of the room at an alarming sight. And I think sight is spelled S-I-T-E, but okay, fine. Grandma, the boy called out. She was across the room, sitting in the top cabinet of one of the drawers. Raph received no response from her. She didn't even turn her head to acknowledge his presence. Instead, the old woman lowered herself further down into the shelf. As if in a trance, she began contorting her body like that of a rag doll's. She twisted her torso till she was able to lower herself as far into the shelf as possible, akin to someone jamming clothes into an overstuffed shelf. With only her hand reaching out of the drawer, the elderly woman stretched her arm outward and inexplicably closed the shelf of the drawer with herself still inside. I liked the image. I thought it was unsettling. It's hard to explain. And so at this point, I got a little bit more hopeful. Okay, maybe the start was a bit wobbly, but now he's settled into some unsettling images that he could really work with. But then he just kind of lets this go and moves on to other stuff, which isn't nearly as effective.
Yeah. Similar thing happens with his brother, and then it turns out, well, plot twist. It wasn't really them. What was it? We don't know. A ghost or an apparition of some sort. But he finds his grandmother and his dad and his other brother.
Yeah,
and they're not contorted and twisted into a drawer. Should we jump towards the dream sequence, because that's probably where it starts? Or do you have something pre?
Yeah, everyone, they have dinner. They prepare for bed. It's noted that the grandmother, Eve, has shingles. And then I'm not sure if it's a dream. I think it's a dream. She turns into a crocodile monster in her dream.
I'm not entirely sure if that was a dream either. I think it must be. Right?
And the thing is, again, with these sort of literary devices, so making it unclear if something happened or not, it can be a highly effective literary device, and it's been used to great effect. In other books, it's just he handles it a bit clumsily. So instead of being confusing in an engaging way, it's confusing in an irritating way.
Yeah. A really famous example, he's just about to get into the dream sequence, basically. So maybe the crocodile grandmother was a part of the dream. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. But Jimmy goes into a dream sequence, and they all go into this weird dream sequence, which we'll talk about in more detail. But just before we do, I guess the issue is like a dream sequence. I think you've got to be careful with, personally. A really famous example of one that obviously did really well and became like a massive cultural phenomenon was Nightmare on Elm Street, and it does work occasionally, but because there's a real risk, and I'm going to flag that this will be doubly the point later in the book, but there's a real risk when you do something like that you completely deflate the story, because none of the things that were happening ever had any risk, and doesn't really drive the story, and it just like feels like you've wasted people's time. So you do have to be careful. But that's one of the reasons why, like, I think Nightmare on Elm Street was such a clever book about it. Like, you die in your sleep, you die in real life, and that sort of stuff. There's real world consequences of a dream, which was quite an interesting thing. So that's all I'm going to say. He took a punt. I think he missed.
He's
playing with
taken
fire.
many punts. He's an inveterate punter, at least in this book.
So I guess the way I'd say is like some literary techniques are high risk, high reward. Some are a little bit safer and they'll get the job done. I think this is a high risk, high reward technique, and F. Gardner needs to keep on practicing. You know what, Jack? I reckon he probably has been practicing. What's the bet that in all of his other books there's fucking dream sequences?
That's what I'm concerned about when you talk about reading another book of his, that it's just going to be the same. But maybe he's reflected. Maybe he'll listen to this episode and decide that, given that two very famous and competent literary critics have offered this advice to him.
The internet's foremost anthropologists.
The internet's foremost literary critics. The best literary critics in the world,
PhD
probably in history.
Bro science, specializing in obscene literature.
We've both won Nobel Prizes in literature. We know what we're talking about.
Twice. We've both won them
Both.
twice.
Multiple times. I've got so many. When they call me up now to tell me that I've won, I just hang up. Say, look, I don't have any space left in my house. I don't have space anywhere. It's just full of Nobel Prizes. My house is unusable because its entire interior is full of Nobel Prizes. There is no space for a person. There's no space for another Nobel Prize, let alone a person. They've ruined my life. I'm homeless. I can't use my house because of the number of Nobel Prizes in there. They're killing me. It's a burden being this brilliant.
See, F. Gardner, you've got someone to aspire to, Jack.
I've been made homeless because I've won so many Nobel Prizes.
How many literary prizes you've won? It's so funny.
Oh, no, it's not just in literature. I win all of them. In physics, chemistry, medicine, physiology, just all economics. I even accept peace prizes. I think they're a bit silly, but, you know, a prize is a prize. I do get that prize money. I need to live. I mean, hotel fees, because I can't use my house because it's full of Nobel Prizes, are pretty high. So I only live off the prize money. That and my very, very expensive cocaine habit. Anyway, enough about me. And my non-fictional life. I'm showered with praise and admiration. Where were we up to? Oh yeah, so their grandma turns into a crocodile monster. The scene where he describes her transformation into a crocodile monster was pretty good. It's gross. She bursts out in sores and her eyes almost pop out of her head and her tongue gets really big, and she grows big teeth. Yeah, so that wasn't bad. Chapter 7 is called Nightmare, and Jimmy's dreaming of playing hide and seek. And oh, wait. So some shadowy apparition enters the house and visits Jimmy's room and jumps into Jimmy's dreams. So this is where it goes, Nightmare on Elm Street. The problem is, so it was back to what you were saying before about how the dream sequences in Nightmare on Elm Street work really well because there's a sense of danger. And that movie, I saw that one ages ago. I don't remember the plot that clearly, but pretty quickly it's established that you can, if you die in your dreams, at least when Freddy Krueger's around, you die in real life. So from very early on, you know that people are in danger in their dream. However, F. Gardner never establishes whether any of the characters are in danger or not during their dreams. So it feels kind of toothless. At one point, the apparition picks up scissors or a fire poker or something, and he's going to bludgeon or stab to death the people in the house. And that felt like, oh, okay, now there's danger. But then he just disappears and doesn't come back. Anyway, that's my criticism of this section as a whole. I wasn't sure whether I was meant to feel nervous or not as to whether they were in danger. Anyway, so Chapter 7 Nightmare, Jimmy's dreaming and he's playing hide and seek, and this apparition which entered his dream starts calling for him. And Jimmy recognizes that this isn't Raph's voice, and Dream Jimmy thinks he's playing hide and seek with Raph. Jimmy hides because this voice is scaring him, and then he starts hearing it stomping around downstairs and it starts calling for him. And out of nowhere, Jimmy remembers a treehouse, and this is foreshadowing for the twist that will come. And the intruder is getting closer and closer to Jimmy. I think Jimmy's hiding in a bathroom closet or something. And then all of this grinds to a halt when F. Gardner decides that he needs to explain the uncanny valley to the reader. I quote, "The uncanny valley. It was a term Jimmy had only become familiar with recently. He remembered hearing the word in art class. He and the other students were all putting together a class project. The term, meant something appearing to be unnatural, something which might resemble some human characteristics, yet are not quite convincingly realistic. A sense that gave a feeling of unreality."
A sense that
I also
gave
want
a
to say,
feeling of unreality. Fantastic.
he keeps using as a way to explain why children keep talking and thinking about Boltzmann brains, quantum field theory, Dante's Inferno, the uncanny valley, Deus Ex Machina, all sorts of things that you wouldn't expect. I don't know how old these kids are, but I think they're quite young. You probably wouldn't expect them to be thinking about all of these things all of the time, but he always explains it away as, they discussed it at school. It's, at school this 8-year-old was reading the Divine Comedy. At school they were talking about Boltzmann brains. Which, those things are interesting, and it's good to push kids. It just doesn't come across as something you can necessarily believe, that all of these concepts are from their school classes at primary school or something like that.
Yeah, it's a lazy technique to attempt.
Yeah. It's the laziness. If you did it with one thing, then I'd think, okay, that kind of makes sense. As a broader point, it's a problem of, it's back to that suspension of disbelief problem. So yes, this is a horror book, a supernatural horror book. So there will be plenty of things taking place here that can't happen in the world outside of the book. However, a good author is going to be able to make a reader be able to suspend their disbelief at those things. And part of that is by not pushing the reader to have to suspend their disbelief about everything, or even about really, really dumb, minute details about, what are they learning about in class? Those are stumbling blocks to suspending disbelief that really don't need to be there.
Yeah, and it's all for the purpose of what? Just hamming in some reference that he wanted to make to appear smart or something. It's garbage.
Anyway, this
coming for you.
This chapter ends with the shadowy figure's footsteps fading away from Jimmy. And I said it before, now I'm repeating myself after I complained repeatedly that F. Gardner repeats himself. But there's no sense of danger in this because you don't know if this shadowy apparition can hurt Jimmy. Jimmy's obviously scared in his dream, but you don't actually know what this thing can do.
Yeah, it was
not
like
in the
a
sense
big reveal
of building suspense. It's just like, well, I don't know what this thing is, so I'm not actually that invested.
It was a big reveal in Nightmare on Elm Street when they discovered that they would actually be harmed by what happened in their dreams. Like that was a point of, oh shit, like surprise, and it turned up the terror.
Yeah, but from what I recall, it happens pretty early on.
Yeah, because it's got to establish the but they did it well.
It's well paced.
Although I only watched the first. I don't believe I've watched any of the others. So how do they keep up that
I've
premise
only watched the
for
first and
for
quite
the
a while
rest of
ago.
the sequels? Is it just like, oh, now we know that he can fuck them up in their dreams? Like, can he fuck them up in their daydreams or something? You know? Like, you better stay concentrated on something concrete that's right in front of you at all times. maybe it's Sam Harris actually is like forcing you to be present, because if you start drifting off, he'll fucking show up in your mind and like punch you in the head. And if you die in your daydreams with Sam Harris, you die like right there on the spot.
Sam Harris
in
does
the
do
present.
jujitsu. Yeah, maybe he just comes and like chokes you out in your
Gravels-
dreams
gravels your
if you let
snapshot.
if you let yourself
Put you in a
become
triangle
lost in
choke.
thought again.
Sam Harris
It's part of the
is
waking up
haunting
app.
people.
If it detects you drifting off into thought, it just explodes and kills you instantly.
Sam Harris just comes out.
You have to do it with your phone placed on the top of your head so that you die immediately when your phone explodes. Otherwise, you're not doing it right.
Yeah, so
Crazy
basically,
old
long
Sam
story short,
Harris.
F Gardner
just
fumbles
like
it. Sam. Poor old Sam. He's extremely distressed about artificial intelligence for somebody who meditates so much.
He is very distressed about it. There are a lot of people who are very
He's a lot of
distressed
things
about it.
he's very
And
distressed about, actually.
I find machine learning and more broadly artificial intelligence very interesting. I'm quite nervous about the applications of the technology just because I don't trust people to be sensible and not weaponize it as soon as they can weaponize it. It probably already is weaponized in what form it is now. It's just another powerful technology that I'm sure people will use to nefarious ends.
People have a habit of doing that. But people also have a
Yeah.
habit
Well,
of
it's
doing
like
amazing things with technology, like create this podcast
Yeah.
and join our
Well,
joining
it's
our
exactly
Discord.
that. It's like with finding out that you could release so much energy by splitting the atom. You got nuclear energy, which is a real benefit, and you got thermonuclear weapons, which are less helpful. Well, I mean, it's not splitting the atom, thermonuclear. Okay, so just atom bombs then rather than hydrogen bombs from splitting the atom. And anyway, this is a tangent. Like Sam Harris does have some reasons to be concerned about what we're going to do with AI.
We've gone from Nightmare on Elm Street to Sam Harris to nuclear. It's discussing the pros and what the ethical quandaries of having access to thermonuclear energy. Yeah.
All I want from
this
AI
is where you come to get your
is for it to be able to
conversations, people.
auto-generate the perfect first-person shooter to me forever. It
All I
never
want
stops.
from my
I'll
technology.
I will never have to get up from my PC. The only thing I will need is a steady stream of piss bottles and poo socks, so that
And
I'll
Uber
never
Eats
have to
straight to
stop
your face.
playing. Yeah, exactly.
The only
I'm sure
thing
I
I
could
want
just
from
get
my
like
technology
TPN
is
hooked up or something like that.
straight into your head.
Feed me parenterally.
Yeah, the only thing I want from my technology, I recently got LiDAR on a... Sorry, I didn't get LiDAR. So I got an iPad.
You
which
got
has,
LiDAR installed in your body,
in
so you
my
don't need to
eyes.
open your eyes. You now have night vision. Levi can navigate in pitch darkness because the LiDAR sensors implanted into your skull.
Become the world's greatest cave explorer. Yeah, so... yes, the only thing I want from my technology, I will get there eventually. I will say this sentence. I will complete it. Is I want to be able to take high-resolution 3D images of my dick. That's all I want. I think technology can stop
That's it.
once I can do that. Because the LiDAR is too janky. You're not going to get a good, like, feel. If I sent you a 3D LiDAR rendering of my dick right now, it would not be very satisfying. Because it's just like, it's too low
Is
resolution.
it just going to look like a PS1 sprite?
It's going to look like, imagine if the Minecraft dudes had dicks. Like, it looks like a Minecraft dick, you know?
I'm almost certain the Minecraft modding scene has supplied that already.
So yeah, I want better LiDAR. I want better consumer LiDAR.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the book.
What I want is a natural language, is some sort of transformer model to be able to generate F Gardner prose forever. and you
Hey,
can just
what if
strap
we
me into
just-
a chair and make me read F Gardner prose until I die.
If we bought all of his books and fed them into TP3 or something, there's probably enough there for it to actually do something interesting with it.
Yeah. We could do a marathon. We could do the challenge to see who can read it without stopping for longest before breaking. Be the championship.
That would
book
blow up
club
on
from
4chan.
hell.
People would just get around, like, see how long they can tolerate reading the garbage that comes out of, like, infinite F Gardner.
Infinite F Gardner. It will outlive humanity. Imagine if the infinite F Gardner became self-aware.
Decides instead of turning the planet
It's
into
like
paperclips,
that
turns it into
paperclip thought
crocodile
experiment
novels.
about how if you have a super intelligent AI whose objective function is just to produce more paperclips, and it uses all of the Earth's resources to make more paperclips. What if it's the case, except with making F Gardner prose? All of the Earth's resources go towards
Dedicated
producing more
to
F Gardner.
F Gardner prose.
That's how the human race goes extinct. We are Icarus flying too close to the sun. And the F Gardner prose machine would then explain the story of Daedalus and Icarus because that's necessary. But there'd be no one to read it. There'd be no one to read it.
It would be constantly
F. Gardner
explaining
prose
to
for the
itself
sake of F.
its
Gardner
own
prose.
references.
It explains them to itself. It gets stuck in an infinite loop of explaining to itself its reference and then referencing it to itself the reference that needs to be explained to itself.
It goes in and forgets to put in a base case for that loop, and it's game over. Consumes the entire
recursion
universe.
to infinity of F. Gardner explaining to himself the uncanny valley. There's no limit. It spreads out into the universe in search of more resources so that it can keep pursuing this loop further. It takes over all of the universe. It becomes this multiverse cancer, just growing through the multiverse, consuming universes, so that it can keep explaining to itself the
It's
story
like as the
of
bubbles of
Icarus and
entanglement
Daedalus.
like blow out into the multiverse. It's just F Gardner prose just consuming the rest of physical reality.
And it all started because
at the
Book Club
speed of
from
light,
Hell
F.
wanted
Gardner
to
prose.
wanted to make an F Gardner generating machine.
It all started with
the multiverse.
with two fucking dumbass hairless apes feeding a weird doohickey machine like a bunch of fucking obscure crocodile books. It destroys the multiverse.
We become the multiverse antichrists. The two beings
Now,
responsible for the destruction of
the
everything
Antichrist is a
conceivable.
reference to the Bible and how the Antichrist will come back and destroy the world through Armageddon. If you go and listen to episode whatever about Revelation, you'll understand that reference.
Exactly. What if we made a competing F Gardner bot that is explaining to itself the story of the Antichrist and one explaining to itself the story of Icarus, and see which one consumes all of reality first?
Oh, yeah.
There's this
yeah.
titanic struggle in the multiverse between these two
It's like
AI
Titans.
constructs, and they're competing for
Multiversal
resources
AIs.
and fighting an eternal war so that they can explain to themselves the meanings of their respective literary or biblical allusions.
And if there are adversarial GANs, then they might be trying to like see which one comes up with a
competing with
better
themselves at
reference.
the same
They're
time.
competing with themselves about creating a better reference and then explaining it better. And which one's a more believable explanation? Which one's more high
No,
fidelity?
but that's not
F.
the
Gardner
F Gardner objective function. The F Gardner objective function is to keep repeating yourself and keep.
and maybe they
It
start.
can't be clarity.
They start also like foreshadowing the end of their own universe, and in fact they change the way that the universe will end through their foreshadowing. Instead of the great
And they give
collapse,
birth to a third F Gardner construct
made out of
which
pure
then
vibrations.
which exists to explain the foreshadowing taking place and explains to itself the foreshadowing.
They call it the Kali Yuga F Gardner machine, and then they explain to one another in a Trinitarian, the great Trinity, what the Kali Yuga is, and why the fact that there's 3 F Gardner machines destroying the universe is a biblical reference.
A 4th one appears, explaining what the Holy Trinity is. So we're responsible for the multiverse apocalypse of F. Gardner. Anyway, chapter 8,
dumb.
Hide and Seek. How about I open this up with a quote? One that F. Gardner wrote. F. Gardner, the human, and not F. Gardner, the multiverse destroying F. Gardner Pro's generating AI that I'm foreshadowing at the moment because I am
This
that
is
AI
how the universe
writing
ends.
Back into the past to foreshadow to itself.
With a whimper or a
is a
bang.
literary device
Or
used
F.
by
Gardner
authors.
Pros.
Anyway,
A whimper
Chapter
or
8
bang
Hide and
or
Seek
F.
is
Gardner
basically
Pros.
this dream monster chasing Joe around in Joe's dream. And he hears the voice, and here's the quote. The voice sounded like that of a monster. A monster, Joe said to himself. He knew it sounded ridiculous, but it was the only way to describe it. Something was wrong with the tone he had heard calling out to him. Something was off. Yes, it sounded like a child, but it was too dark. Evil. He had never thought a tone of voice, comma, could actually sound evil, comma, before. Not till he heard that voice. It's almost... Do you think the F. Gardner AI, in some fundamental way, writes fractally in that it will say something and that sentence splits off into basically 2 versions of that sentence, each of which explain the same thing. And those sentences fractalize into more fractals of the same sentence because he's just saying the same thing over and over again. He heard a monstrous voice.
There is, in fact, the risk that the F. Gardner bot will be able to read and understand its own source code and improve its source code. In fact,
Become a more perfect F. Gardner.
It could. Perhaps what's happening is we're seeing it perform metaprogramming on its own source code at runtime. It's inserting references to a sentence it just wrote recently, and it's doing both foreshadowing and pre-shadowing simultaneously at different points in the multiverse.
Post-shadowing.
And then creating tunnels through different parts of the multiverse, allowing the transmission of information between historical branches, so that
do you think Call of the Crocodile just is the F. Gardner bot in the future, which has torn a hole in time, inserting itself back into a past before it exists,
so that it can reference
and then
itself,
foreshadowing its own existence,
using it can foreshadow the fact that it will go back and foreshadow itself.
We are its servants. We are nothing more than fleshy servants for the F. Gardner bot.
I submit myself. I give my whole soul and life to the F. Gardner. The F. Gardner. What is it? F. Gardner Antichrist.
Yeah, it's an F bot.
Maybe instead of sorry, I was going to make a Marilyn Manson reference, but it is just too much. It's too little there. Nah, fuck it. Maybe F. Gardner, Marilyn Manson releases a remastered version of Antichrist superhero and superstar, and puts F. Gardner on the front, and
it's just F. Gardner lyrics.
And then it turns out if you play all of that album backwards, it's actually Call of the Crocodile.
If you read Call of the Crocodile backwards, it's actually the source code of the F. Gardner bot. in a programming language that F. Gardner made up himself, which is why it comes across as being completely incoherent. But you can only understand it if you have the mind of a super intelligent AI. Anyway, the hide and seek chapter with Joe being tormented by this shadow thing that walked into their house and started fucking with their dreams doesn't really go anywhere. There are some pretty funny quotes. So Joe's being tormented by this voice and has a panic attack, except Joe's internal monologue while he's having a panic attack is amazing. It's anxiety overwhelms Joe like never before. A panic attack. More than a panic attack, thought Joe. A mental breakdown. The man had always wondered what one had felt like. He thought he had one when his son Peter died that year earlier, but he managed to pull himself together through that. The urgency of the situation brought a tear to his eye. He was having a mental breakdown, and this is what having one felt like. Never in my life have I felt so helpless. There we go. He has rendered in prose the experience of having a mental breakdown.
And reflecting on whether or not one is having a mental breakdown.
Yeah. Then in his dream, a figure approaches Joe and stabs Joe with scissors. And again, Joe's internal monologue as he gets stabbed is so calm considering the situation. He just says, I can feel it scraping against the bone after he's been stabbed with scissors, and he's pretty calm about it. He doesn't seem that concerned. Anyway, yeah, so the thing attacking Joe is the body post-devourment by a crocodile of Pete, but it's sort of also a crocodile monster. And it starts to drown Joe, and Joe loses consciousness. And when he wakes up, that the eaten Pete crocodile monster is dead and has been stabbed to death with scissors. And Joe says he's sad about this, but seems pretty nonchalant about stabbing a crocodile monster version of his dead son to death with scissors. Maybe Joe's just the strong silent type, and I don't know.
There's also another like foreshadowing thing in there where they were playing like scissor paper rock earlier and stuff, and yeah, then the crocodile monster has scissors in it as hands or something like that. Yeah, more of that self-referential stuff. Good on him. I bet you got an A in English in high school.
Yeah, yeah. Chapter 9, Terror, is Jimmy in his dream now. And now for the next few chapters, he does this thing where there's like pumpkin ooze or slime dripping from everything. And when monsters get hurt or stabbed or something, they bleed pumpkin puree.
Yeah.
And then that just stops after a while.
He gave it up.
He's
just like, this isn't working anymore.
Yeah.
But he doesn't
He
go
just
and
keeps cycling
remove it.
through different ideas, which means none of them find any purchase and feel like they have any weight behind them. And yeah, this chapter just seems to be him thinking up images that he considers to be unsettling and then showing them to you, and nothing happens. It's the equivalent of someone just lighting matches in your face. He finds a giant heart and it explodes. Jimmy sees pillars made of bone, but these don't really go anywhere.
He's just setting.
Do you have
the
anything
scene,
more to say
mate.
about this chapter?
It's just the mise en scène. He's truly a master.
It's the mise en scène.
It's the mise en scène.
It's a mood piece.
He's a master of set and setting. Sorry, what was it? I don't know. Set and setting and context. He really
Could
makes
you
you feel like
explain
you're
that to me
there
at length?
with his rich descriptive language.
His rich descriptive language.
His rich descriptive language is lulling me into a state of confusion, and I just go along with the rest of his narrative.
Lulling me into a pussy trance.
Jay Gardner gave me a pussy trance with 200 pages of rich descriptive narrative. So many literary devices, so many references. I grew a pussy and then got wet from that pussy, and then was entranced by F Gardner. The thought of F Gardner pounding me. That's how
And
rich
if
and
listeners
descriptive
don't
his language
understand
was.
these references, listen to our episode on practical female psychology. For the
We're
practical
more
man.
self-referential
So
than F Gardner. We are the F Gardner bots. We are, Jack and I are 2 of the 4 F Gardner Armageddon robots who can read our own source code and split the multiverse with F Gardner prose. That's this entire podcast, all 20-something episodes up until this point, we were just setting ourselves up so that we could reference them in this episode.
That's called world building. That's a literary device. Maybe we should explain it at length. Chapter 10 is called Despair. This chapter has some really good quotes in it. Jimmy finds Joe in a cave, lying on his side and crying. And, oh, that's right. When Joe fought the crocodile monster who was Jimmy with scissors, that crocodile monster bit his hand off because, like Captain Hook got his hand bitten off by a crocodile because he just keeps referencing Peter Pan. I don't really know why. But Joe's hand's come back now, so it's all good.
He watched like one of the early Jordan Peterson videos, where he talks about like Peter Pan and why humans are so connected to narratives and mythology and the collective this is basically F Gardner's Peterson phase. He started cleaning his room.
It would not surprise me at all if F Gardner were a huge Jordan Peterson stan.
Yeah, 100%. Probably does cum tributes to them. F Gardner's giving cum tributes to Jordan Peterson.
He's got a jam jar with a printout of Jordan Peterson's face in it that he comes in each day and is hoping to fill it all the way up. And when it's done, he'll mail it to Jordan Peterson's house.
With a copy of Call of the Crocodile.
Jordan Peterson cum tribute.
Blowing up.
Gee, thanks, F. Gardner, Jordan Peterson says in public repeatedly. So this is the part where they meet the dead baby monster that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I really like the dead
You
baby
remember
monster. I really like the dead baby monster. I thought it was weird. He's like
Joe
the babies. Yeah, read it.
Joe and Jimmy are they're walking through this dream cave, and they find a line of those crane machines, the one where there's that you're navigating this crane hand and you have to drop it down and pick up stuff with it. But it's one of those claw machines and you pick up toys with a claw. And I explained that really badly. But instead of toys or trinkets or whatever they're normally full of, it's just full of dead babies. And I've got written in my notes, no context, seems that F. Gardner just thought this would be gross.
Is it distasteful if I got a hard on in this section of the book?
But this does go somewhere, at least within the context of this chapter. So there are seats everywhere, they notice. And then a creature made of dead babies appears and starts talking about Limbo and Dante's Inferno. And then Jimmy and Joe leave Limbo and nothing happens. But I've got the quote here. When they're confronted by the dead baby monster. Who are you? Joe asks, uncertain as to if this figure is friend or foe. The figure crept closer, not making a sound despite it is gigantic lumbering size. What Joe and Jimmy saw made their hearts sink. It wasn't a man. This creature was a walking, talking pile of dead infants, all of which were stitched together, forming the shape of a man. "You're familiar with limbo, are you not?" inquired the beastly figure. "Limbo? Like the game you play, where you try to walk under a stick?" Jimmy innocently asks. The figure scoffs at the boy's naivety. "Not quite, child. No. Limbo, as in the dwelling place of those met with an unfortunate end, where the souls of the just are fated to go. Most of them exceedingly young children. The knitted collection of dead babies twitch and wiggle as the giant lifts its arms, pointing at the empty seats. "Please leave. Your time has not yet come," the ghastly figure states. "Oh, thank God," Joe mutters to his son as they bare the end of the room. Yeah, it goes nowhere. I think he wanted to show us that he knew what limbo was, and also thought that the dead baby monster would be gross.
Which, like, I got around the dead baby monster. I thought it was a good piece.
It's like Dead Space 2, but as a book. As a section of a book.
I also did like the claw, the Toy Story claw. You know, get the little green dudes out, except instead of green dudes, it's fetuses.
And then later in the chapter, they meet some demons. And is this a bit where the demons can read his mind? Yeah, this is when the demons... They're now in purgatory. And they meet two demons, and they can read Joe's mind. And they tell him that he agreed to stay forever in purgatory. And Joe says, "No, I didn't agree to that." But the demons tell him that he did, but he forgot because of grief. And then this plot point goes nowhere. It's just not brought up again. That Joe maybe or maybe not agreed to stay in purgatory forever or not go to heaven. And then that monster that looks like Pete comes back and bites Joe's hand again, and Jimmy finds scissors embedded in its side and uses them to stab the Pete crocodile monster. And they run away, and then suddenly Jimmy is injured, and it says that Jimmy is mortally wounded, but then it's just forgotten about. Like, he's just fine again soon after. There's a lot going on in this chapter. Oh, that's right. So they fight the crocodile monster with rosary beads. So Jimmy finds some rosary beads in his pocket when the crocodile monster is grabbing him. And first he stuffs them in its mouth, and then it happens again and he stuffs them in its empty eye sockets. Because remember that Pete had his eyes eaten by the crocodile that ate him in... I won't spoil the twist, but... yeah. They fight off the crocodile monster with rosary beads.
So this is one of the issues with dream sequences, is it also allows for lazy plot or lazy writing, or both. In that, okay, so now say Jimmy's just not injured anymore. But it's like, well, it's in a dream sequence, so just anything can happen. Like, it doesn't need to have any continuity. So it's a get out of jail free for that sort of inconsistency. It's lazy. You know, I think that dream sequences, to be done well, probably still have to have some sort of internal logic and consistency. It can't just be completely haywire. You know? So, and then the thing that I guess I wanted to ask you about, Jack, as somebody who's writing fiction and hoping to be published at some point in the future professionally, so professional writer, is what was I going to ask you? Was come on, Levi, you can do it. No, it's escaped me. I had a question for you about F Gardners. Sorry. My apologies. I'll come back. I'm sure it'll come back to me.
This chapter closes out with Jimmy and Joe seeing a woman giving birth to a goat-headed child, and then they just leave and nothing comes of it. But I really like his description.
Oh, sorry. There you go.
Yeah.
Is things need to be in a good story, like you don't want to waste words, right? So things have got to drive the narrative or drive something. And it seems as though F. Gardner like introduces many things throughout. I think you've highlighted a number of times where he sort of starts a thread or starts something that could be a thread and then just it doesn't go anywhere. Like the Exorcist stuff that we were talking about earlier with his grandma like contorting herself into a drawer. So what's your perspective on doing that well and what F. Gardner's done?
I want to offer the caveat that I've written a few manuscripts and I'm currently trying to find an agent, but like I'm not published. But you need to have some sort of through line through your book, because if you keep picking up new themes and discarding old ones, then eventually your reader is going to learn that they're not really supposed to care, or they don't have to care about any new thing that you introduce. The more often you do it, the less and less invested someone's going to be in any new thing that you introduce. And there's no sense of weight or continuity or any reason to give a shit about the story if you think, well, there's some particular event happening now, but I know that in 10 pages the author will have forgotten about it completely, and so why should I remember it?
So everything that Jack just said, Call of the Crocodile is the antithesis to that.
It's so unfocused.
I think it's like you've got to apply the law of parsimony to writing, I think.
Yeah, well, you just have to be clear about what you're saying and then say it. It's very hard to do in practice, but you need to know what you're trying to say and then say it, rather than jumping between all sorts of ideas that might be good if you develop them, but if you don't develop them, aren't. Or they're just spitballs. And exactly in that sense, the quote I was wanting to read when you remembered your question about how they come across a woman giving birth to, I don't know, the Antichrist or something. It just goes nowhere. And by this point in the book, we're not even halfway. As the readers, we have already learnt that he's just going to ignore things that he brings up in a few pages anyway. So there's no point getting invested. And he does totally forget about this. But I really like the description he gives of giving birth. The woman's stomach bulged with pressure and she let out a hysterical moan. Sounding like a wolf howling at the full moon, she screams as blood erupts from her every orifice. Joe closes Jimmy's eyes again, fearful of the sight before them. Having seen it 3 times before, when his sons were born, the man knew what was taking place. She was giving birth. And so, I mean, in med school, I was present for quite a few births. And blood doesn't erupt from every orifice. That, their eyes, mouth, nostrils, they're not spurting blood. Blood's probably not spurting from the rectum. I like that. That's what he homed in on. Joe's seen 3 births before, and that's the telltale sign of giving birth, is blood erupting from every orifice.
I would say
old faithful geysers of blood.
If you're giving birth and blood starts erupting from all the females listening to this podcast right now, the next time you're popping out a baby, if blood starts spurting from any orifice other than the obvious ones, please consult a doctor straight away. None of this water birth crap. Go straight to the hospital and shoot the kid.
I don't know if I agree with you there.
It's the Antichrist.
I'd be more inclined to say, if blood's not spurting from every orifice, then you're doing it wrong.
And you are the doctor, mate.
Yep. That's what we were taught. If blood's not erupting from every possible place where blood could erupt from, then they're not giving birth. F. Gardner here. So Joe's an expert. And John knows that this woman's giving birth because blood is erupting from every orifice. And you can, from that, I think we can infer that blood erupting from every orifice is a necessary component of giving birth. Anyway, the child she gives birth to has a god's
Gardner
head,
doesn't have
and
children,
then
does he?
Jimmy and Joe leave, and it's never mentioned again.
It's just foreshadowing.
Chapter 11 is called Deus Ex Machina.
When I saw that chapter title, I was like, this is bullshit.
And this is there was another section here where I got a sinking feeling that, yeah, he's gonna try to do something really meta. Well, the title of the chapter, Deus Ex Machina, gave it away. But then, so now it's Raph in a dream, and Raph says, "What kind of amusement park has live fucking crocodiles in it anyway? It's like a child designed that place. An idea a stupid kid would come up with," Raph angrily thinks to himself. And I thought, oh fuck, it's going to be something about a child writing this story and they're all characters in a story. Foreshadowing, but foreshadowing of a really obnoxious plot twist. Oh, that's right. And at the end of the previous chapter, actually, Jimmy and Joe approach a familiar figure and they're feeling good and they're not in a nightmare anymore. So the ghostly menace leaves them alone and starts harassing Raph in his dreams, which is why we're now with Raph. And I wonder whether this guy played Five Nights at Freddy's, because this chapter started turning into Five Nights at Freddy's fan fiction, or it felt like that. And it fucking wouldn't surprise me if F Gardner on the side also wrote erotic Five Nights at Freddy's fan fiction, getting fucked by animatronic animals or something. That's just slanderous, but I stand by it. It's becoming a common theme where every episode will accuse the author of whichever book we've read of some strange sexual fetish.
Man, whatever. We can tell.
F. Gardner just can't get hard unless his sexual partner is dressed up as one of the animatronic animals from Five Nights at Freddy's. It's a weird kink he has.
It's a very strange subsection of the furry community. Even other furries look at them like, what the fuck? They're on.
That's one of those Five Nights at Freddy's people.
The Five Nights people. Yep. There's F. Gardner and Don Paris.
So anyway, Raph's in a dilapidated indoor amusement park and is crawling through a tube maze, and there's water on the ground. And yeah, this could be one of those shitty Steam shovelware horror games designed for Twitch streamers to scream at. In the tube maze, he finds his granddad, who's meant to be dead, and his granddad tells Raph that this is purgatory, then disappears and explains what purgatory is. Because he fucking has to explain everything. Water on the ground turns to blood, and Raph sees pentagrams on the walls. And, so this whole thing's turning into a Deicide album cover. And a disembodied voice is leading Raph through this tube maze. And then Raph hears the screams of the day when Pete was eaten by a crocodile. Yeah, so look, he gets out of the pipe maze eventually, and he's in the amusement park where Pete got eaten. He keeps referencing Dante's Inferno. I don't know why. It just cause. And yeah, now's when it goes really Five Nights at Freddy's. So there's a stage, and there are animatronic figures there with reptile heads. And the animatronics switch on, their eyes are glowing, they start laughing, they disappear, there are jack-o'-lanterns everywhere now. And a crocodile appears on stage, and then it turns out the crocodile is Satan. How's that for a plot development? Except this is a dream, so we know it's a dream, so it's kind of like, okay,
so is it Satan,
dreaming
or
about a crocodile Satan man.
Is it the Phantom
in Five Nights at Freddy's F. Gardner edition?
Meets Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
meets
He's got some good descriptions
Dante.
of the crocodile Satan, though. So he's got
I couldn't help but picture it quite comedically in my head.
a crocodile sat in a chair in the middle of the room. It sat not as a reptile, but as a man, as if it were trying to be human. Mankind always tries to anthropomorphize things by their nature. However, in this case, the crocodile sat in the chair with its legs crossed, just as we do, contorting its body in an impossible posture, mocking our physiology, and defying the boy's preconceived notions of reality by doing so.
He is one of those insufferable atheists, isn't he?
I bet this guy cruises r/atheism.
Yeah, 100%. Need to put the fear of God in him.
I bet this guy is one of those people who watches Rick and Morty and thinks that they're a genius for understanding the subtle comedy of Rick and Morty. It's a pretty old meme, except I think
Gets
it
all the
sums up F
references.
Gardner pretty well.
Good on him. He's being his authentic self. An
He's
authentic douchebag.
I think in some cases there's a compelling case to be made for hiding your authentic self.
Please stop writing F Gardner.
I'm all for him writing more. I just think he should learn from each book. Yeah, anyway.
Are we up to chapter 12?
Yeah, it's the end of chapter 12. The crocodile turns into a Satan, or turns out that it is Satan. And again, this just doesn't come back. Being charitable, I would say, okay, all of these fucked up images that pop up and don't come back in these chapters, you could put down to the shadowy menace that has entered these people's dreams, just trying
My
to
working hypothesis
to unnerve
was
them.
that it was my working hypothesis at that time was that it was the ghost. I thought, okay, he's going to be some fucking thing that he's going to flip here, but being generous, I was like, okay, maybe it's just like a classic haunting story, you know,
Yeah.
like The Exorcist or whatever. And in fact, this is the brother's ghost who is haunting his family because of his horrible death or something. And for some reason, his brother's ghost is also really ironic in the way. Isn't that funny? Ghosts do tend to have a sense of irony, don't they? They
Yeah,
like
a
to do
strong
things
sense of
that are
irony.
like, yeah. Interesting. I'd only just realized that all ghosts tend to be very dry sense of irony when they're
We
maliciously
need more slapstick
haunting people.
ghosts.
Yeah, I mean that classic Casper, you know, that 90s Casper shit.
Yeah, the friendly ghost.
Bring back slapstick friendly ghost. I reckon if John Cleese died, because we all know that John Cleese is immortal. If John Cleese were to ever die, which he won't, his ghost would be really funny and slapstick.
Yeah, I'd say so. Anyway, what happens for the rest of this chapter? Yeah. So a chandelier falls down on the Satan crocodile monster's head and kills it. And this is described as a deus ex machina. And then F. Gardner keeps referencing the Bible, talking about the walls of Jericho and Jonah getting eaten by a whale, and it doesn't add anything. He's just saying stuff. Then Raph sees a door and enters it, and he's outside and sees his dad and Jimmy. So at the end of the chapter where Jimmy and Joe were running away from a crocodile monster and seeing a woman give birth, they see a figure, and so it turns out that's Raph. But the timeline doesn't make sense because the shadow monster stops fucking with Joe and Jimmy and goes to Raph and starts messing with his dreams. But it would have to be messing with all of their dreams at the same time for this meeting to make sense. Like, yeah, I get it's dream logic, but the logic of the external world you'd hope would be a little bit more coherent than the dream logic. Anyway, this is just like a nitpick among so many nitpicks, but the timeline doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I just gave him a pass on that one. I was like, whatever, fine. They're sharing each other's dreams. I've seen that. Like for example, Inception, all in each other's dreams. They're because of like the technology they're using or whatever. Sure, but technology, magic. What's the difference?
Yeah, but he explicitly says that this shadow monster is unhappy that it can't fuck around with Jimmy and Joe's dreams, so it leaves their dreams and goes to Raph's dream. He quite pointedly says that
true.
Now it is not interacting with Jimmy and Joe's dreams, but with Raph's dream. But if he just left that bit out, then I could have said, oh, I guess it's like multi-dreaming.
He shot himself in
the
foot. Yeah, he shot himself in the foot. Yeah, he just introduced just a blatant inconsistency. This is why he should have read it himself at least once before publishing it.
He definitely should have. Anyway, they all wake up. The chandelier in Raph's room has fallen on the floor, and it fell on the floor while he was asleep. And when the sun came up, this shadow monster disappeared. The one that was messing with their
Another
dreams, and it doesn't come back. It's just we're done with that.
It's the sunlight. It's the 1st of November or whatever.
Yeah, Halloween's over.
Like it's all Saints' Day, so it like vanquishes, and again, another Deus Ex Machina crap, and some reference to it being 12 o'clock or something, and just more references, more useless references, so much symbolism.
Yeah. So everyone's woken up. But Raph says he feels unsettled, like something's not right. And he goes and looks in the mirror in his bathroom and screams. And then the chapter ends. So now, in the next chapter called Confusion, we're downstairs with Grandma Eve and Joe, and they're making food. And Joe's confused. He sees that it's almost noon, but it feels like he's been awake for longer than that. However, Grandma Eve feels like she's just woken up. However, this confusion seems to extend to F Gardner because he keeps saying that they're making breakfast, and then sometimes will say that they're making lunch, and just keeps alternating. And
it's surrealism.
There's a great there's a great piece of unintentional comedy here. So Joe is confused, and he says, "The man's thoughts were akin to a wild storm, stirring about the autumn leaves. It felt especially like that when the media got involved, just 2 days ago on the radio. I can't believe they were still talking about it, like my life is just some sick story they can tell for fun. There were so many wonderful things about Pete. He was an imaginative boy who loved his family, but people will only remember him as that kid who got eaten by a crocodile." The tone of this book is so bizarre. I at some points wondered whether this was an extremely high-effort troll, but the fact that he's written 12 other books makes me think that he's probably not trolling.
He's extremely sincere. To him, this is a good thing.
Anyway, for the rest of the chapter, Joe convinces himself that his mum is cooking crocodile for breakfast/lunch, and it just turns out that she's cooking duck, that she's not. But he strings it out for quite a while. I'll give him credit. He did build some tension here, so that was nice. But the way he describes Joe's uncertainty as to whether his mum is cooking a crocodile or not is great. Here's a quote. "Could it really be?" Joe continued thinking, his mind now racing. Is she really cooking a crocodile? Or maybe an alligator, since those are legal to cook? If it is a crocodile, did she buy the same one that killed and ate Pete? Joe thought. I know she's old, but if she's done this, then she's really lost her marbles. Does she think eating it would serve as some kind of closure to us? Joe wondered, now fearing his mother's mental state. It doesn't give a reason as to why Joe just decides that his mum's cooking a crocodile or an alligator because those are legal to cook. And at several times in the book, he repeats this same line that alligators are legal to cook and crocodiles aren't. I guess you could spin it that this is an aspect of Joe's declining mental state, that he suddenly suspects that his mother's not only cooking a crocodile, but cooking the crocodile that killed and ate Pete a year ago. But you're not given much lead up to that. That's a bit of a reach.
The only explanation reason would be like Pete's losing his mind. And so not Pete.
That was
Joe's
my best
losing
guess.
his mind. He's been on the plonk, and he's just completely cooked himself to the point where he's misattributing insanity to others.
There's also a good element of bizarreness. This is a very brief quote. "Okay, let's get this show on the road," the grandmother had shouted from her bedroom. "Sounds like she changed her shirt," Joe thought. I just love that section that Joe could tell that she's changed her shirt from what she just said to him. It's more F Gardner bizarreness. I don't get it.
Is it intentional bizarreness, or do you think that he's just sloppy?
There's a good chance that this guy is just a bit kooky. I think that's the most likely explanation, is that he's scatterbrained and pretty kooky.
Maybe he wrote the whole thing whilst he's on psychedelics,
or he hasn't read over what. Yeah, if you write a full manuscript, just given the number of words in it, it's very likely you've written some really dumb shit in it. But that's why you do revisions. Why you read through it again and say, "Oh, okay, that actually just doesn't make sense what I wrote. I'm going to change that." Which is another reason why I'm not sure he actually revised this before putting it up on Amazon.
Shall we move on? Are we up to Halloween Forever?
Halloween Forever,
Yes.
Chapter 14.
Yeah.
And actually, yeah, at the end of the last chapter,
This is a big one.
Joe's mum's cooking duck. It's not a crocodile or an alligator, which is legal to cook. And yeah, Joe decides that they're going to leave their grandmother's after lunch. Joe goes to get Jimmy to set the table. The table's already set. I think he was trying to make us feel that things were still strange and they were still dreaming. They look around for Raph and can't find him. They just find scissors in Raph's room and hear a disembodied voice in Raph's room, and a storm starts. It's now taking place from Jimmy's perspective. He's in Raph's room. He smells smoke. He smells burning. A fire alarm goes off. Orange smoke starts creeping out from under Raph's door, which has locked itself. And so Jimmy jumps out a window and finds himself in a forest, finds a treehouse. This is the same treehouse that has come up a few times in the story before. No one's visited it, but they just say, "Oh, I saw a treehouse in my head and it seemed very familiar." So he goes up into the treehouse, and in it there's a Ouija board, a drawing of a face, there's a clock in the shape of a crocodile, there's a glass of water, and a chair with a note on it that says, "Sit here at exactly midnight." And it's 11:55 right now. There's a quote I've got from the end of the chapter where he just keeps repeating himself. "The boy leaned in closer, looking at the time on the clock, 11:55 p.m. But I just got up a little while ago. It shouldn't be nighttime," Jimmy thought to himself, growing more confused than ever. But yes, it was almost midnight, at least, according to the clock. It was dark outside too. Could that be just because of the storm? Or is it actually night now? Jimmy began questioning his sanity. Looking at the clock, the young man saw that there were only just a few more minutes before midnight. It was as if he arrived here at precisely the right moment, as if he were fated to do so, like some unseen force was guiding his journey. So, in case Jimmy, seeing that the time was 11:55 on the clock, were not clear to us, F. Gardner feels the need to keep telling us that it's almost midnight, and the note says that at midnight he needs to sit on the chair, and it's almost midnight. It's only 5 minutes to midnight.
I hate this book.
I did not enjoy this book at all. I picked it because on the 4chan lit boards, so many people there talk about it as if it's this unbelievably bad book. You read it, you just can't believe how bad it is. Whereas it's just lukewarm is the best description I can give of it. It's not great, but it's not like transcendently terrible. It's just, yeah.
It's not The Room, you know. It's not The Room.
No.
You know. So the reason why I'm saying this here is because everyone, the next chapter. So Jack just read the end of chapter 14, Halloween Forever, with Jimmy sitting down in a chair at the break of midnight and see some tree houses and all this sort of good stuff. And the next chapter is called The Boy with the Green Eyes. Now, if you remember, Pete was a green-eyed boy who had been eaten and had his beautiful green eyes plucked out of his skull because turns out crocodiles very dexterous with their tongues, fantastic at fellatio.
Mm-hmm.
Take your risk.
It's a dangerous game. You're really rolling the dice.
But if they like you and you just put your dick in their mouth, mate, you are going to have the greatest blowjob of your life.
But that fear's part of the experience.
Yeah, it's like people who are into autoerotic asphyxiation or glory holes, just, maybe
anything
I'll
could
get
happen.
gonorrhea this time. Maybe I won't. We'll see. Roll the dice. See what happens. Maybe the croc will bite my cock off.
Is it going to be a crocodile on the other side of the glory hole? I don't know.
Joke's on you, croc. I'm the one with gonorrhea. I dare you to bite it off.
Yeah. I think we forgot to say, Pete has green eyes, and especially at the start of the book, F. Gardner just keeps telling you that he has green eyes in case he's worried that you're going to forget and you're not going to understand that it's important. He just keeps saying it.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me of my son's green eyes. Oh, the skeleton thing doesn't have green eyes like my son did.
Yeah. It's heavy-handed.
So you might be wondering, who was this Pete? Who was this boy with the green eyes? We're about to find out in chapter 15. Now here's the part where things get really weird, remarks a boy with crocodile green eyes as he holds a flashlight to his face. And it was at this exact sentence that I wanted to punch the fucking wall.
I'm going to send you a picture of my
reread
notes
this
for
sentence.
this chapter.
I want to throw my fucking phone at the wall because I was like, no, bad F Gardner, don't do this. I reread that fucking sentence. I was like, you motherfucker.
Yeah, he had foreshadowed that he was going to do something like this throughout the book. And he went and fucking did it. I've sent you a picture of my notes, and it what I've written down, I think,
pulling it up,
gives a good first impression of how I was feeling when I read that this whole thing was Peach telling a story to his friends.
Jack just has written bullshit. Just chapter 15, bullshit. Yeah, it's complete bullshit.
That's... Man, fuck, I knew he was going to pull this sort of shit, and he did it, and I still felt disappointed.
Yeah, it's so annoying because, it's coming the whole time, but then it's still so distasteful when he does it. It's still so distasteful when he does it.
How about
it's like
I read
a dude busting inside you and he didn't ask, and you're just like, mate, I gotta go take the morning after. You should just ask. Fine, I knew you were gonna do it. It's still pretty fucked up that you did it. Thanks, mate. Prick. Stop busting inside me, F. Gardner.
How about I read This is a longer
Stop
quote
getting
of
me-
F Gardner
stop getting me
busting inside
pregnant.
us, but I feel like it's necessary to read this out so that we inflict this on our listeners just as F Gardner inflicted it on us.
We're not compassionate. In fact, we take joy in making other people suffer.
No, we want to
So
share this
suffer
misery.
now.
We went through it, and
Yes.
you're going to have to experience
Misery
at least
loves
some
company.
of what we went through.
You fucks.
3 young children sat around a table inside a wooded treehouse. Halloween is coming up. We could try it ourselves, Pete said. You might want to explain it again, so Johnny understands too. He only just got here, replied Mark, as he pointed to another boy who was slightly younger than the other two. Pete, let out an annoyed grunt. All right, Mark. I'll give you guys the tedious exposition again, he said, as the youngest boy leaned in closer, eager to his what his two friends were bickering about for so long. Okay, you can start the story, Pete. Okay, I will, but make sure you pay close attention to what I'm saying here. It's not like reality is like a book you can just flip back to and reread parts you overlooked. Do you understand what I'm saying? Follow my words closely. The boy with green eyes responded, holding the flashlight to his face. People say there was some experiment a long time ago, at least a few decades ago, I think, Pete began. It was an experiment done by some scientists who tried to see if they could communicate with ghosts, he said. Not just any ghosts, though. Made up ghosts, Mark said, jumping in. Aren't all ghosts made up, though? Johnny the younger boy asks. Well, what he means is fictional people, Pete said, realising that Johnny was only growing increasingly confused by his unsatisfactory explanation. Let me put it this way, Pete began to say, stopping momentarily to think about his words closely. These scientists got together in a room, and they came up with all the traits of a person they were making up. Their name, birthday, things they liked and didn't like, and other stuff. Do you follow so far? Pete asked, looking over at Jimmy. I think so, Johnny replied. Oh, so Johnny, not Jimmy. Jimmy's an avatar of Johnny. It doesn't matter, they're meant to be the same. Johnny replied with feigned uncertainty. So they made up a person. I don't remember their name, but that part doesn't matter for us, because if we end up doing it, we'll need to make up a name ourselves. Anyway, these scientists gave their character a story so detailed that they were supposed to have created results in real life, Pete continued. What do you mean by that? Johnny asked. Pete. Well, it's a theory about how, if enough people think about something, even if it's not real, they can make it a reality. I know it sounds hard to believe, but they say it happened, Pete said with conviction in his breath. Those are just tall tales, Mark said mockingly. Urban legends. Stories to tell around the campfire and such, Mark continued to say in a dismissive manner. Irked by Mark's cynicism, Pete shoot is his friend and annoyed grimace, which causes Mark to grin. Mark's attitude managed to get under Pete's skin and it amused him in an odd way. So they decide to make characters that are really, really lifelike and so detailed that they come to life. And like this is their plan. That's where Joe and Jimmy and what's his face, Raph, all come from. They're all fictional characters in the Pete verse. And man, I fucking hated this twist so much.
Yeah. Yeah. It was soul crushing.
Yeah. Yeah, so they decide they're going to meet up on Halloween in Pete's treehouse to do this thing, to do some ritual to bring the characters to life, I guess. And in preparation, they need to write about these characters and make them so detailed that they become real. And then this quote pissed me off so much. So, says, "You guys are really weird. You sure you want to do all that still?" the boy asked, while secretly wishing now that Pete had forgotten like Mark had. or that Pete at least had second thoughts and changed his mind. So this is from Jimmy's perspective. Jimmy doesn't want to go through it because he feels uncomfortable. The truth was, it really did freak Johnny out. Not just their plan, but the whole idea. He disliked metafictional topics, as it unsettled him. The topic forced the boy to think about his own existence. That was something Johnny did not like to do. He wasn't sure how anyone even could. He had heard that some of the greatest scientific minds had driven themselves to madness, thinking about such ideas. Questions like, how is existence even possible? I just love the idea of some kid in primary school not only disliking metafictional topics, but thinking to himself that he doesn't like metafictional topics. This book was boring and irritating.
There's so many
before the
layers
twist,
deep
and
to
after
this.
the twist, it was boring and irritating, and it's just such a fucking chicken shit twist.
And there's just so much eye roll. I just kept on rolling my fucking eyes, man. Yeah, I checked out pretty hard after this after this chapter. Like, checked out super hard.
What about the next chapter where they start discussing bolts and brains?
I will just say, so the caveat that I was, just before we move on, the caveat that I was referring to earlier was that everything that was happening, every single fucking thing, inconsistency, weird thing that happened is in the entire first 14 chapters of the goddamn book can now just be chalked up to, oh, well, it was some kids telling a story in a treehouse. You know, it's just like, it's the same category as dream sequence. It's like, you just made us read like 100 pages of not merely a dream sequence, but a dream sequence within a fictional story. Or like, or by one of your actual characters that, okay, we haven't met yet. We don't know Pete from a fucking bar of soap, mate. Pete's dead inside the first half of the story. It's a non-character. And like, leaving it this exactly late in the fucking book is such horse shit, because now you want to restart the whole journey of building a rapport with these characters again from the halfway through the book after this fucking chicken shit reveal. Fucking garbage, mate. Like, he would have been better off like doing some strange, like, surrealist, like, interleaving like the two things or something like that, you know.
It's a really big problem introducing something like this so late in the book without working up to it in any way, and somewhat foreshadowing that you're going to have some sort of meta twist isn't enough to make this feel earned. At the moment, it just feels like he's almost changed books more than halfway through.
Yeah.
And as a reader, when you read that, you think, oh, well, you just had these characters and threw them away, so why should I care about this new one you're showing me? Because you could well just throw this one away. 2, for this to work, like you said, he really needed to start bringing in Pete as the author of Joe, Jimmy, and Raph and Grandma Eve way earlier in the book, almost from the start. Because otherwise, you just come in and you don't really know this guy at all. You don't know the situation that he's in. And it's just out of nowhere. It carries no weight.
Yeah, he fucked it. He fucked it really bad. I have a suspicion. Here's a conjecture, Mr. Jack. I think that F. Gardner... I recently got dinner with a former colleague who started talking nonsense about quantum physics and how one could use your consciousness to, like, change reality. And he's like, I would explain it to you, but it's like quantum physics stuff. I'm like, you don't know shit about quantum physics, mate. Give me a fucking break.
We're
like, dude, you can't even code. Like, do you expect me to think somebody who can't even fucking code to understand quantum physics? Like, give me a fucking break. Like, in order to study that sort of physics, you have to be dealing with fucking computers. to run simulations. Like, you can't code shit. You don't understand quantum physics. Fuck off. Anyways, he like just started talking nonsense, like this garbage nonsense about like how if you think about something and like it visualize it, you can manifest it in the world, and he's using it to like try to do all these business ideas. It's like, I manifested this business thing into existence. Like, no, you didn't. You went and did something about it. I think F Gardner is on that fucking train, and that train includes Deepak Chopra, which we need to read at some point, and there's some other people who talk about like the power of consciousness and all this sort of thing. I think F Gardner is in that. I think my conjecture is that F Gardner believes that. That is a belief that he holds, and it is a belief that is held by F Gardner. And a person named F Gardner may believe in that sort of thing. And the reason why I say that is because his YouTube handle is @famousauthor. And you see with these types who read The Secret or read Deepak Chopra or whatever the fuck, that they think that somehow telling a narrative about one's life will make that narrative come true, much like ancient people who lived in tribal societies that thought the world was 1,000 years old and created by whatever strange mythical. Much like those people, when they discovered writing, a lot of ancient cultures actually thought that there was something magical about something being written down, and in it being written down would become true. Those sorts of people are fucking insane, and I run the other direction when people start talking like that. I think F Gardner's one of those people.
I find it quite interesting
and
that you
slanderous, I know. Yeah.
his YouTube handle, famous author, in that sort of hashtag manifest sense. Because when I read it, I just thought he was trolling. I felt more sure that he was a troll when I found out that. But then I read one of his books, and I think he's actually been sincere. But I think it says something about our...
He either thinks he is a famous author, or he's trying to manifest becoming a famous author.
Yeah, but I think it says something about
what a narcissistic fucking handle to get.
Our inclinations, our intellectual inclinations, that your first thought is that he's some sort of quantum charlatan, and mine, it was that he's a troll.
I've come across far too many quantum charlatans. I don't... Yeah. Maybe I'm just more cynical than you, Jack.
The enigma that is F. Gardner. We really should try to interview him on the podcast. I've reached out to a few people that we've talked about on the podcast and asked if they want to be interviewed. Funnily enough, none of them have gotten back to me.
Really? You don't say.
Who'd have thought?
Who would have thunk it? Should we maybe
I don't think we're going to become an interview show. I really don't think we're doing ourselves any favours with potential guests.
Oh, because all we do is talk shit about them. Fuck them. Fuck you. Fuck your book. You're on this fucking show because your book sucks. That's why.
We've covered things that didn't
and
suck.
People don't want to read it.
Harassment Architecture didn't suck.
Like Bronze Age.
Unabomber Manifesto didn't suck.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The Eye of Argon I really enjoyed. What else? What else wasn't?
I spoke too harshly, Jack. We do in fact read good books.
Ecclesiastes.
But in each case we still talk shit about it.
Oh yeah, that's a given.
It would take somebody listening to our episodes, hearing how much shit we talk, or if we've made an episode about them, being okay with how much shit was spoken about them.
There would need to be
like Don Paris is not going to come on this show after we've talked about Ilona getting fucked in front of him or whatever the fucking joke was.
Yeah, we really did sexually disparage Don Paris PhD quite a lot. That's how you know that we're really serious academics.
It's just
common academic technique to make fun of someone's sex life. How you know we're legitimate and people who should be listened to.
We are an authoritative source. So can we do you want to just like
Let's get
bust
through this
out
more
the rest
quickly
of this?
because the book just remains really boring but makes less and less and less sense after this fucking
Yeah.
bullshit meta twist. Chapter 17, Halloween's End, is basically Pete, Johnny, and Mark in Pete's treehouse doing this ritual where Pete's written a story that includes characters that are so well realized that they could become real. One of them's brought along a Ouija board, which they need for some reason. It's just part of the ritual. In a detail that I really enjoyed, Pete has brought some holy water along in case things get out of hand, and he'll use the holy water to keep the situation under control. I liked that. Yeah, and they
He's
make an
thinking ahead.
effigy out of like a CPR dummy and other stuff. They basically make a scarecrow and seat it in a chair. And then midnight strikes, lightning strikes the treehouse, and then we go to chapter 18, Inferno. And the treehouse is on fire, and so is Pete, and he's roasting in there. The treehouse collapses, and he loses consciousness. Then he wakes up in hospital, and a nurse injects him with something that makes him fall asleep. And then... And this is a really good bit, actually. So
Yeah, keep going.
Pete
Keep going.
hears a voice saying, it's a doctor's voice. He knows it's a doctor's voice saying, Pete's going into shock. And so once he started going into shock, as the understaffed emergency room hectically struggled to prevent the cataclysmic night from descending into a full-scale catastrophe, the boy moans in disoriented misery. And then after he's gone into shock, so he's tanking his blood pressure. Pete felt droplets of a wet substance fall upon his arm. Pete shakes from the cold fluid and attempts to brush it off. And also, this is after he's meant to have passed out, but he doesn't pass out. The boy's arm is held back firmly, and it dawns on him that what he felt must have been fluid dripping on him from a syringe. Pete's suspicions are confirmed when the boy felt what he assumed must be a needle piercing his burnt flesh. It stabbed deep into his skin as if a fine piece of cutlery slicing into an overdone slab of steak. What is that? Is that more morphine? Or maybe it's fentanyl, Pete thought, as he remembered back to one of his science classes at school. I hope it is. That should get rid of my pain. There's a reason people get addicted to that kind of stuff. It's supposed to feel really good, the boy thinks, as delirium takes hold of his mind. And I'm going to assume that the emergency department doctors in F. Gardner's novel are all competent. So I'm not going to tell them how to suck eggs. But I just want to say, if you've got someone who's going into shock and who is falling unconscious, you want to be really fucking careful giving him morphine or fentanyl. That you want to be really careful with that, because I mean, unless you're trying to euthanize them, you want to really watch what you're doing there. But look, F. Gardner's a pro. F. Gardner's a pro, and I'm sure this is best practice management of whatever is wrong with Pete getting roasted in a treehouse, struck by lightning.
I feel as though every insult that I leverage, every insult that I throw at another person, might be able to be turned back at me. So with that being said, those in glass houses.
Those in glass houses start podcasts.
He really... yeah, fantastic. He is one of those guys that just probably doesn't know a lot about any one particular thing, but has some loose spattering of knowledge from... I doubt he's read any full books about things, but he's read like
things
articles
in
and
general.
he thought, yeah, but he's read articles on like, I don't know, BuzzFeed or something, and he thinks he's an expert in quantum physics and shit now. And so it's just full of these like loose kind of intelligence signaling moments, like the quantum stuff, the Boltzmann stuff, or like this, the fentanyl stuff. But it's really weak. I don't like it. And
It's
it
just
makes him sound
annoying.
like a really annoying person. And it's completely unnecessary. It's like, you're writing a horror novel, right? We're not here to like learn science. We're here to hear a good scary story. With that being said, maybe he is an expert in all these things.
Yeah, he
And
could
he's
be.
just letting us know. He can't help it, just seeping into his work.
Now, the next chapter, Purgatorio, things get even worse. I've sent you over Discord a picture of my notes from this chapter, and I think the first line of my notes, it just sums up how I feel about this chapter and where the story's going. Just all of it.
What are we at? Chapter 19, Purgatorio. P finds himself in the story he wrote. Fuck! Jack just has fuck written in it.
And that's just how I feel about it. Fuck, it's getting even
looping
worse.
in on itself. It's meta-narrative self-reference looping in on itself. This is like a fucking Goosebumps story gone wild, mate.
Pete wakes up in the story he wrote, and it turns into basically a bad acid trip. I wonder if F Gardner is just a huge space cake, takes tons of psychedelics, because this particular chapter was like a bad trip. I guess so. Like, good on him, I guess, for rendering a bad trip.
I've never had a bad trip. I don't know what, because I've never tripped before. I've never taken acid or any sort of illegal substance.
Yeah, if I were to have taken these things, then I imagine that this would describe the feeling of it not being fun.
Could be like if I use my powers of imagination.
Anyway, so Pete wakes up and he's looking at the world through Raph's eyes. So remember how Raph looked in the mirror and screamed and the mirror shattered and then we didn't hear from Raph again. Well, turns out that Raph looked in the mirror and he saw Pete's face and Pete's green eyes that we're always told about. And then Pete becomes Jimmy at the Ouija board, and then a stage appears and Pete receives a telepathic message from some beings that are really powerful or something. And then they disappear and Pete sees his creations, Joe, Raph, and Jimmy on the stage, and they're aware that they're creations of Pete's and they resent Pete for it because he made them suffer by creating them. And I think they stab him with scissors. And they bring up, that's right. He keeps bringing up derealization, depersonalization disorder.
Yeah.
All
the way from
and he keeps bringing up anathema, but misusing it. He keeps saying that anathema is like a punishment that's so bad you wish you were dead. Whereas I'm pretty sure that anathema, at least in the Christian or the theological sense, I think it's an ecclesiastic ban on something. I'm pretty sure. So I'm not a theologian, or maybe I should say I'm the best theologian in the world. But at least from my limited knowledge, the way that he uses anathema is not what anathema means.
Yeah, I think he got it wrong.
Which, yeah, fucking fine. So Pete's creations want to kill him for their suffering, and Jimmy stabs Pete through the nostrils with scissors, and they decide to cook Pete in an oven and eat him for dinner. So they shut him in an oven. And when they shut him in the oven, he starts experiencing senses beyond the usual 5 senses that humans have. And he meets transcendent entities.
He starts experiencing proprioception. That mysterious
and then
sixth.
He stops being able to remember his name, and then suddenly he's hungry. And I'll read a quote from the end of the chapter, which is just
Sounds like acid.
fucking... I feel so hungry, Pete thinks to himself, as his newly formed stomach growls. Now in the illusion of a corporal plane, the boy looks over in the direction of other beings. Innocent laughter. Next to him, Pete could hear the sounds of children at play. Nature takes control over him as he begins to approach the laughing children. A loud thump catches Pete's attention, and he turns to the point of origin. It was himself. It was him, as he had written himself in the story. An identical copy of himself trips and falls down beside him. Lying on his side, his double stares at him. Tiny green eyes stare back into his wide green ones as Pete's jaw opens and mouth salivates. Pete's double screams in terror as Pete's primal urges completely take over. He was now no longer possessing any sense of right or wrong, only an insatiable appetite. A symphony of screams rings loudly amongst the chaos as Pete feasts upon his own flesh. It's not till he's finished that common sense returns to Pete's mind. Tears begin to form, and for the first time ever, a crocodile cries for real. So Pete turns into a crocodile and eats himself in a story he wrote. Ah! It's bullshit.
It's a DMT trip, or it's something. It's a 5-MeO trip. He just took it so many layers deep there.
So many layers deep.
The thing is, I don't know how he thinks that this can be considered horror though at this point, because it's just surrealist. Like if you animated this, it would just be like one of those crazy surrealist films, like animated films where shit's just changing and there's no explanation for it. It's just weird stuff is happening. Like the opening scene of Rick and Morty, the opening credits. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, in terms of
like,
horror,
it's not horror, it's surrealist.
We have no idea what the stakes are, because in the next chapter, so as Pete is eating himself as a crocodile, he sees two red eyes above him in the sky, and someone is reading from the book of Pete's life. And he realizes that this person looking at him is the central character of the book he wrote that is named after his pet snake. I don't think this character is ever named, though. But anyway. And then Pete wakes up in the treehouse, and Mark and Johnny are there and are saying, oh, it didn't work. Nothing happened. So we've got another dream. That whole thing was... turns out not a dream sequence, but Pete forgets that it happened and thinks that the ritual or whatever also didn't work, but has a bad feeling afterwards, so somewhat remembers it. And anyway, the other two kids go home and Jimmy goes and sees his mum, April. Man, fuck. Jesus.
It's just like, at what point do you feel at all invested in anything that's happening in any of the characters?
Exactly. He fucks you around so many times that you just
into
stop
nothing.
caring. And it's not like these were particularly interesting characters to begin with. Even when I thought that we might stay with the character for the duration of the book,
he cooked it.
Oh yeah, and Pete's glad that Halloween's over, and he goes to bed and pets his pet snake, and then draws a picture of it, which is Ouroboros, like that symbol of a snake eating its own tail, which F Gardner just keeps referencing in the book, but I don't know why.
He's just got like this weird. You know why? Because it's self-referential.
Yeah,
Seeing
that's what I
itself,
was thinking.
that's
It's
why.
like, oh, is it a story that constantly refers to itself? But
It's exactly what's happening.
yeah,
Piece of
yeah,
shit.
fine, okay, fine. It's deeply symbolic, and
You know that's what's happening.
chapter 21 is winter, and it's now winter, and Pete is reading with April, his mum, and April's watching the news, and on the news there's an announcement of the opening of Nightmare Land, which is this theme park that's going to be built in a castle that was Vlad the Impaler's castle, which has been brought over from Romania specifically to make Nightmare Land. And of all of the inconsistencies in the book, I think this is the most jarring. The fact that Christmas takes place in winter. And as we all know,
It's completely unnatural.
it's completely unrealistic. Christmas takes place in summer. So I live in Czech Republic at the moment, where I don't
even
know.
there,
Everyone's just
that's
doing it
where-
wrong. For some reason, they keep doing Christmas here in winter. And I keep trying to explain
Which
to
doesn't make
everyone
any
here
sense.
that Christmas doesn't happen in winter. And I think it's because I don't speak European and they don't speak Western in Europe. So there's that language barrier. But they just look at me blankly when I say you're doing Christmas wrong. It's meant to be warm. Why are you making it cold during Christmas? You're meant to make it warm. But
They start
yeah,
speaking French at you.
I need to work on my European. And I wish people here would learn how to speak freedom. But yeah. That's outside of the scope of this episode, I think. The language problems
How to speak freedom.
here in Europe.
So good. Well, the fact that there's only one language in Europe really shows you
everyone
how
speaks European.
culturally devoid they are.
I wish I'd learned a bit of Australian, but they don't. We learn about Pete's late father in this chapter. Turns out he was from Transylvania, and he was Transylvanian and must have emigrated from Romania at some point, but Pete didn't know him that well because he died when Pete was a baby. And he's just fucking introduced in the second or third last chapter or something. We were meant to give a shit about him. And he was really superstitious about stuff. And Pete's mum gives this long-winded speech about how, oh, it's just because people from Romania are like that. They're all superstitious because of Vlad the Impaler, upon whom the Dracula story was based. Yeah, I mean, fine. Talks about him for ages, about Vlad the Impaler, some fucking 15th century voivod in Wallachia, I think, but okay. Now that's F. Gardner's latest fixation while he was writing this book.
It's like he doesn't think that the story or the characters or the ideas in the book can stand on their own merit, which they can't.
They can't. I mean, he's correct.
So he feels the need to like hang a bunch of references to other things. Off the, as if that will somehow rescue the fucking train wreck that is his book.
And then April starts defrosting Crocodile. Oh no, alligator, because alligators are legal to cook, as we've been told again and again in this book. So she starts defrosting alligator to eat for dinner, and Pete is unnerved by this, but he can't put his finger on why he's so unnerved about eating alligator, and asks to go to bed. And he does. Oh, and then his mum really wants to go to Nightmare Land, to the grand opening on Christmas Eve. Yeah, that's basically chapter 21. Chapter 22, The Woman in Black, has a bit more going on. Pete wakes up. It's now, he just keeps referencing vampires and Dracula. I quote, "Light shines down from out of Pete's bedroom window, beaming directly at the sleeping boy's face. It was the morning sun shining down upon him, heavily, like when the day's light shines down upon a vampire's coffin. The garish illumination awoke the slumbering young man."
You know, what's that film about? Werewolves versus vampires? Underworld.
Oh, that was a
Underworld,
mad movie. That was so
that
good.
was great. And that only picked off two tropes, two horror tropes. Vampires and yeah, so like maybe
they made them
Hellboy,
cool.
but it's an action film. Yeah. But F Gardner, like he's picked like Nightmare on Elm
Everything.
Street. It's got some sort of like Pinhead vibes going on. It's got like Exorcist vibes going on. Then it gets into like vampire shit and weird surrealist stuff. And then pretty trippy self cannibalization and transfiguration stuff. Like, what is going on here, mate? There's no consistency. Like, yeah, just pick a trope.
There's just no
Stick to
focus.
it. Just for one book, you should just do one trope. Just be like, I'm going to write a vampire book, and don't fuck around with werewolves. Don't fuck around with like Cthulhu monsters. You know, just stick to just the vampires, mate. Just see if you can pull off one trope before you try to mix it up. You know,
there are also so many scenes which could just be cut from the book, and it would improve the book. How they go to some Christmas market before going to Nightmare Land, and there are a lot of Romanians there. And now that like it's just been introduced that Pete's dad is Transylvanian, he starts talking about Romanians all the time. And while they're walking around eating Romanian food at the Christmas market full of Romanians, April, Pete's mum, keeps talking about how superstitious Romanians are. And then the scene just ends and it doesn't add anything. So basically they both drive to Nightmare Land and get into a car park nearby and are really unnerved because the car park is not very full. And this is one of those situations where the reader doesn't feel unnerved because there's not really any reason given for the reader to be unnerved. It's just that the characters keep saying, "I am unnerved." This is pretty good though, because April can't find her car keys and she reaches into her pocket to get them and hurts herself on a pair of scissors, which are in her pocket instead of her keys. And then she says, "Not again," which diffuses what could have been the tension in the situation, because the scissors are a recurring theme. I'm not sure what they're meant to be saying, but there keep being scissors popping up everywhere. Pete got stabbed by Jimmy through the nostrils with scissors. Joe fought off the Pete crocodile monster using scissors. But it's just the oddness of April finding scissors in her pocket for some reason and stabbing her hand on them and going, "Not again," which implies that this keeps happening to her. And you think, wait, why do you keep having scissors in your pocket? It just
and
totally
forgetting about it. You put
undermines
scissors in your
whatever
pocket
tension the scene
and you forgot
might
about
have.
it. And it's not related to any supernatural stuff. It's just you're a bit of a dunce. And you keep on fucking cutting your hands on scissors that you put in your fucking pocket.
So you keep putting scissors in your pocket. Anyway, they meet a black-clad
The explanation
figure.
is, I'm an idiot.
Yeah, exactly. Now, remember way back to the start of the book when Joe was driving Jimmy and Raph to their grandmother's place, and he was explaining to them what Deus Ex Machina was, and he almost ran over a woman, an old woman wearing a black cloak, because he wasn't paying attention to the road. He was a distracted driver. Well, what's his name? Pete and April hear a ringing noise in the car park, like the sound of keys, and they notice that there's an elderly woman wearing a black cloak who has April's car keys somehow. And she starts taunting them. And it's the same woman that Joe almost ran over in Pete's dream or whatever. And she approaches April and Pete, and I really like that April immediately considers stabbing this woman with the scissors in her pocket. That was her first response. I quote, "What's going on here, ma'am?" April asks, as she remembered the pair of scissors in her pocket. She didn't want to, but April realised that she could use it in self-defence if this woman were to try to get violent with her and Pete. The enigmatic woman's full ghoulish appearance grows completely clear in the light. She might not be anything otherworldly, but she could still be dangerous. Even an old woman could present a threat if they're mentally ill, Pete thought to himself as the woman stepped closer to their parking spot. You heard it here. That's how you deal with the mentally ill. You stab them with scissors. F. Gardner's got the right idea.
That you left in your pockets.
Yeah, exactly.
And his voicing.
I was like, that's the first thing that April thinks of. It's, yeah, I'm going to cut this woman up with these scissors that I've just got in my pocket.
Again.
And this book takes a massive turn again from now on. It now turns into like a cult kind of thing. Because then...
the other issue that I have with F. Gardner in this book is his voicing of Pete's in a monologue is like...
It's just F. Gardner.
Is this a kid? It's just F. Gardner
it's just F.
writing
Gardner.
The first thing that comes to his head. There's no voice. There's no sense of like trying to even give this... If this kid's 14 years old or something, there's no sense of age, no slang, no innocence, no nothing. It's just F. Gardner, just essentially getting a second way of narrating his own story.
Yeah, but then every other character speaks exactly the same way as well. It's everything is just F. Gardner. Anyway, April asks this lady who she is, and I'll just read the quote. It's, "Where I'm from? Well," so this is the old lady replying, "Well, the little club I'm part of has gone by many names. The Order of the Serpent, long ago, back in Romania. The Thule Society, back in Germany." I don't know how to pronounce. I've heard Thule, Thule, but you'll get Thule this time. "Don't worry about your keys, miss. You and your sons are not going to need them. Not where you're going. You're not going home. Not tonight," the cloaked woman said, with dark conviction in her breath. "I'm only going to ask you one last time. Who are you?" April yelled. Pete and her were now well aware that this woman was nothing short of a threat, despite her frail appearance. The ghastly woman sneered. "Calm down. Come this way. Inside the castle," she says, pointing towards the parking garages exist. Not an exit, it's an exist. As the two of them already came there to visit the castle, they do as she says while keeping their distance. "I'm going to get security once I get there," April says sternly, as the cloaked woman continues her creepy chuckling. Swinging the door open, the mother and son walk through the exit and onto their final destination. At last. I love that April, fucking Mother of the Year, decides that this woman's a real threat and just decides to follow her anyway. It's like, yeah, okay, I'll go with this woman with my son now that I've decided that she's a threat.
My son and scissors, and I'm going to talk to the security guards. I'm going to go full Karen on this bitch. But first I'm going to follow her into the castle.
And this is petty, but he keeps getting it wrong. It's not a typo. They cross a drawbridge, not a drawbridge. So a jawbridge, I just think of a giant mouth open. Like they walk across its tongue to get into this castle. The castle that was taken from Romania and rebuilt in Chicago by a cult, by the Order of the Serpent, to trap Pete. And the Order of the Serpent, who has not appeared until the last maybe 20 pages of the story, who have grand designs on Pete, and we're meant to be invested in them, even though we've only just learned about them. So basically, they're
last chapter, second last.
Yeah, chapter 23, Dracula's Castle. They're in Nightmare Land. A blizzard started, and they enter the castle, and the drawbridge is pulled up behind them. They're trapped. Although F. Gardner forgets this later, and they just leave through the exit. But fine, yeah. They come into the castle and they're suddenly surrounded by all of these people in black cloaks, which have the Ouroboros on their hoods. And the old woman from the car park appears and starts talking to April and Pete. And all of these people are members of the Order of the Serpent. And former members of the Order of the Serpent were Dracula and Heinrich Himmler. That's how you know it's a bad... Fucking... It's just such a lazy thing. It's, how do I let the reader know that this is a bad society? Well, we'll stick some Nazis in it. We'll stick a Nazi and Dracula in it just so you know that these people are bad news.
Yeah, subtle.
So this
Extremely
lady
subtle.
explains what the Order of the Serpent does. I'll just read the quote because that's probably easier than me summing it up. The people I just mentioned, and as a note, Himmler and Dracula, why, they were very dedicated members to our cause, the cloaked woman responds. Cause? What cause? Pete inquires of the mysterious lady. Our organisation deals with the practice of magic, the science behind one's own will, the practice of focusing one's thoughts, or prayers if you prefer that term, the belief that mankind can essentially generate results into reality if enough people want something enough. Prayers, but to a much more extreme degree, the darkly cloaked woman explains at them. And she should have just used the SE5. That would have been easier. She could have hit up Don Paris, PhD, paid him $5,700 and would have been fine. Anyway.
Would have been a better read.
Do you know who Heinrich Himmler was? He was Adolf Hitler's right-hand man in World War II. It's widely known that he was deep into occult practices, and ours is the same group he was part of. It was called the Thule Society in his time. Before him, the Order of the Serpent in Dracula's time, when he had membership in it. We mean to bring about a new world order by willing a being capable of tremendous destruction into it, she continues. A being? April asks, scratching her chin with her still bleeding finger. There are already so many legends based on Count Dracula, and we thought maybe we could take advantage of that. Sure, he might not have actually been a vampire or anything like that, since vampires don't really exist. But if we capitalise on the imagination of all those who are intrigued by legends such as that, perhaps we can morph something like that into the real world, the woman explains. Basically, their plan is to kidnap fiction authors or people who are highly talented when it comes to fiction or creative writing.
Like Gardner.
And get the hit exactly like F. Gardner. And
he's the target.
He's the ultimate target. And get them to, I guess, write stories to make the general public think about this destroying being who'll bring about the new world order for the order
channeling
of
the imagination,
the serpent.
like orgone channeling.
And then the Order of the Serpent are going to use... So they were the ones responsible for moving this Romanian castle to Chicago. And in rebuilding it, they made sure to make all the materials really nice and flammable. So that when people come in to look at it, they're going to lock the gates, they're going to pull up the drawbridge and set the place on fire and kill everyone. And that'll be a sacrifice to the creature that has been written about by very talented authors that the public believes in now. And burning everyone to death in the Dracula castle will be an offering to that being, which will make it real. I think that's what their plan is, but I'm not sure.
Should we read the final chapter?
There's a section where they explain to Pete. Actually, no, fuck it. I can't be. Yeah, no, I'm not reading that quote. I can't be asked.
Somehow they escaped the situation.
I love how. Can you tell us how Pete saves the day? Actually, I should say though.
Can we
so
just read it?
this lady tells Pete, "Okay, you can join us willingly, or we'll make you work for us." And she reveals their grand stable of 2 authors who are tied to chairs with their mouths gagged, And she's like, look, you can willingly join the Order of the Serpent, or you can be like these two authors whom we've kidnapped and tied up, and somehow they're helping us write about this destroying monster or something. And so Pete has to think quickly about how he's going to get everyone out of this situation. Is that your answer, Pete? Rejection? The woman asks, as she slowly walks around the boy, as if a cat stalking its prey. Mum, run, Pete says, as he decides to take the offensive. What are you doing? The evil woman says, as Pete quickly rushes towards the cold stone wall of the castle. Stop him, the mad woman shouts, as she sees the boy grab one of the torches heating the room. Taking it off the wall, the young man thrusts the blazing torch atop the draping, which had previously been thrown onto the floor, as the fire quickly began to engulf it. Shocked by the child's resourceful spontaneity, the other members of the cult jolt back, feeling the heat of the flames in their faces. No, you idiot. Are you trying to kill yourself too? The woman screams, reaching out for the boy. Defending her son, April pulls the pair of scissors out of her pocket and thrusts it towards the vixen. Blood oozes out of the upper abdomen of the wicked mistress as April holds the bloodied pair of scissors in her hand. In shock and anguish, the sinister woman screams. Falling to her knees, the burning drape catches the bottom of her coat. Taken off guard, the rest of the cult begin to take a tactical retreat. The cloaked members move quickly towards a marble door and run inside it. So Pete just fucking burns this place down. April stabs an old woman, and then they untie the authors and run away and leave through the exit. Like, that's it. And then, so as they're running out, Pete doesn't know his way around Nightmare Land Castle, but a disembodied voice starts guiding him, and he just decides that it's his dead dad telling him where to go. And okay. And then, as he's about to get out of the castle, he sees a huge crocodile thing, like a crocodile phantom, and it screams at him and lunges for him, but just passes through him because it's a ghost or something, I guess. And then they all just leave and are given... April and Pete are given blankets by firefighters. And I don't know what happens to the two authors that they freed. They're just forgotten about.
And also they're just like, yeah, we're not going to take you into the police station or the hospital or anything. You're just like, just go home.
Yeah, just go home.
Let's go home. There's this fucking burning castle that you just ran out of. Yeah, so that's one of those Deus Ex Machina things. It's just like, there's no explanation for it. It's just, oh, I heard the ghost of my father like beckoning me to find the right exit.
Yeah.
It's just piss weak.
And it's not like, so it's like, you know in Star Wars that use the Force Luke, Obi-Wan Kenobi talking to Luke. It's, in some way it's like this, except that was earned because Obi-Wan Kenobi was an established character by that point. It was, even though the Force is hand-waving, at least the Force was established somewhat. So they'd established a way
and also,
that
like,
this dead guy could talk to Luke.
You have to be...
So it was much more...
Jedi in order to do that, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, like, not just random normal people can do it. You have to have, like, gone through training to be a Master Jedi or something.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about Star Wars lore to say that with authority, but that's what I'm guessing. Yeah, whereas this is just, like, ad hoc, okay, I need to get this character out of this situation. What we'll do.
Yeah, and then the book just ends with... So chapter 24, Horror's End, this is the last paragraph of the book. Is you acted bravely tonight, Pete. Oh, and it's April and Pete are just at home again that night. Like that very night that they fucking burned down this giant castle. You acted bravely tonight, Pete. I'm proud of you. I think your dad would be too, she tells her son. I have a feeling he was with us tonight, Pete says, as he closes the page of the book he's reading. You're not still reading Dracula, are you? April asks the boy as she sits up out of her chair. No, I'm reading something else, he tells her. April walks over to her son and looks at the book's cover. Oh my, that's a story I don't think I've heard in a long time, the mother comments. Pete nods his head. Me too. And there are so many, that's the end of the book. There are so many unanswered questions. Because a byproduct of him just jumping through different ideas, never sticking with one, is that all of those leave loose ends that aren't tied up. Like, what happens to this doomsday cult that just ran off? What's this book that Pete's reading? What was the central character in Pete's headcanon that became real, that was named after his pet snake? There's so much shit going on that just isn't tied up, and the stuff that did happen, you don't really give a shit about.
All I can say is that it's like nearly 9:30 here. We've been going since 5.
I'm pretty ready to be done with this.
This is fucking wrecked right now.
This is one of those books that's
went
just
from being
boring.
sober to being not sober to being sober again in the course of a single podcast recording, much like Edward recently. So there we go. I really dislike this guy.
Yeah, it was a terrible.
I have a feeling that I would also dislike him as a person, just based on what he's written.
Oh, watch his
sure.
YouTube
Maybe
videos.
Nice
you get much more of a feeling of F. Gardner. It
Is
also
he a
is
good
good
guy?
if you watch enough
Do you
of
reckon?
them. You start reading his prose in his voice,
Oh no,
which is
fuck
even
that.
better.
All right, I'll watch like one video. Yeah, it's pretty cooked, hey.
Yeah,
I can't fucking stand this book. Fuck this book. I have nothing good to say about this book.
I'm trying to think. So there was that one scene with the grandmother pulling herself into a drawer that was kind of okay. That's
I did
praise.
like fetus man. I like the fetus monster.
Oh, yeah, I just thought that was
good.
I thought that was
Fetus.
just cheap. So so you liked that.
I like fetus monster. Yeah.
What
but
other
I always
praise
laughed
can
at
I
the baby
give?
jokes. So,
I mean, ultimately,
it is what it is.
ultimately, our rating system for this show is: would you recommend the book or not? And just no, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone.
No. No, if you're thinking about
What did he do well?
reading this book, maybe shave all your hair off and stick your head in some Vaseline and then put your head through like some small bars and then just stay there and never leave. And don't read this book.
And while you're there, start referencing Dante. Start referencing Dante for no reason. While the F. Gardner bot takes over the reality.
And turns all your atoms into material to create more F. Gardner prose out of.
All right. So, next episode, you're choosing the book. You haven't picked it yet, but
I'm leaning towards Messages for the World.
yeah, we might.
Messages
Some
to the
guy
World.
collected together a bunch of Osama bin Laden's writings and speeches and things like that. So we might do Osama next episode
Osama might be a good one.
as a good
That
counter
could be Boxing Day special.
as a
If we get it out on time,
counterpoint
we could release
to
Osama.
F. Gardner's philosophy of the world. Osama bin
We've
Laden.
covered a couple. We've done a couple of Christian episodes. We need to do some Islamic episodes.
extremism.
Yeah, eventually we've done white nationalism. Like we're going to get around to like black nationalism and stuff. Don't worry, guys.
Oh, the
it's
Nation
fair
of
and
Islam
balanced on this show.
We need to do a
Nation of
Nation of
Islam
Islam
stuff,
episode because some of that stuff is so
It's crazy.
wacky.
Yeah, so like, don't worry, guys. I know you think we're all about white nationalists. We're not. All right. We like to cover everybody. Our show, we have a very strong diversity and inclusion board here on the Book Club from Hell, where we ensure that we cover crazy and horrible from all walks of life.
We're equal opportunity like that.
Yeah. And we're not the sort of DEI, lame, hyper progressive types. We don't do active discrimination. We just think, like positive discrimination. We don't do that. So we're not going to go out and find some like crazy texts by people of color just because they're by people of color.
No, we both really think that Well, we choose books based on merit, purely on merit.
Purely on merit. And so if a person of color or a disabled person or a whatever person, an Islamic person ends up on this show, it's because they earned it.
We're colorblind.
It's because they fucking earned it.
F Gardner could be of any background, and we'd still hate Call of the Crocodile.
F. Gardner could be any sexuality, and I'd still want to kick him in the face. It is what it is. He earned his place on the show.
The book club from Hell Pantheon.
He's going to become a villain on our unreleased video game where we actually just torture all the people. It's a torture video game, and we just torture everybody that's been on the show, including Ed
and ourselves. Well, we torture ourselves more than anyone else.
Yeah, this is
we're the ones who have to read this.
Make up. Yeah. I am well and truly cooked. I haven't eaten, and I'm fucking hungry, and I need to go and not think about F. Gardner for a while.
I'm so fucking happy I finished this book. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for picking this one.
Yeah, no, you really did it this time.
You were the one who picked the beginning was the end. I still think that's the worst thing I've ever read.
That was way better than this, man.
No way. I'd read this a few times before reading the beginning was the end, man. That's still the lowest point for me.
All right, let's check off. Last shout out. Go get on the Discord. Join us on the Discord. Motherfuckers, subscribe on Spotify. Give us 5 stars, you bitches. Upvote us. We need that mad fucking viral content recommendation engine pumping out there, getting our name out there. Join the Discord. Give us suggestions. Give us dank memes. Give us quotes. It's fucking dope. It's heaps of fun on the Discord.
Any other shout outs? Oh, shout out Xi Jinping, our greatest fan.
Shout out to Xi Jinping.
Xi Jinping called me the other day and told me how much he loved the podcast. My boy Xi, shout out. Shout out
to Xi.
Yeah.
What's up, Xi?
We hang out a lot. I hang out with a lot of world leaders.
He particularly likes F. Gardner.
He recommended F. Gardner to me.
Hey, shout out to Xi. Should we start requesting cum tributes to Xi Jinping?
Cum tributes to Xi Jinping. Post them in the Discord.
If you're a fan of this show, join the Discord. We'll start a channel that's cum tributes, and our first cum tribute will be collective cum tribute will be to Xi Jinping.
If you don't have a penis, then piss tributes. Piss tributes from the ladies.
Piss tributes. Yep. Yeah, it's all great. It's fantastic.
To Daddy Xi. That's what I call him when
Daddy Xi.
When we do the S&M. He's my leather daddy.
Just red leather. He's pudgy, kind of middle-aged man with his little fucking cock cage on.
He's got an absolute anaconda cock, though. So shout out to Xi.
I heard he's got two dicks.
Oh man. I don't want to divulge too much without asking Daddy Xi if I'm allowed to talk about it. But I mean, look, he'll probably just drone strike my house.
Xi Jinping is in our Discord. So if you want to talk to the leader of the free world, come join our Discord.
Do we have anything to add apart from come and piss tributes to Xi Jinping? That's, I think, the most important
don't read this book.
Yeah,
the second most important thing is don't read this book.
Yeah. Spend all the time you would spend reading this book and making your cum jar or piss jar for Xi Jinping. Immerse that picture of him out. See you next time. Thanks for listening.
See you next time. Thank you.